What's the best troll you've pranked somebody with? I convinced a roommate that Microsoft was coming after him for piracy and that he needed to go down to the courthouse to meet their lawyer for a settlement. In high school, I posted on my wall, "Wow, Facebook automatically censors your password when you post it onto Facebook." Then a bunch of asterisks to indicate that I'd typed in my password and it had censored it. Try it out for yourself. I got 3 passwords that day. I convinced my roommate that he had herpes by stealing his phone and changing my name in his contacts to a girl he had a fling with a few months ago. A little bit of backstory concerning the girl. After he stopped talking to her, she got pregnant and everyone would attack him saying it was his, but he refused to talk to her. So I went ahead and texted him the following. "Listen, I know we haven't talked in a while and I'm sure you know I'm pregnant. I just wanted to ease your mind and let you know that you're not the father. But during my doctor's visit, they told me I tested positive for herpes downstairs. You should get tested. Bye." He started freaking out, and when the guys and I told him it was a prank, he threw his new iPhone against the wall, completely destroying the thing. He then proceeded to storm out of the house, get in his car, and disappeared for about 5 hours. Oh, and this went down on April Fool's Day. By far the best prank me or any of my friends have witnessed. Pal, if you see this, way to be a good sport. I said that the Rickroll subreddit was a sad sub to visit, except I actually hid a link to a Rickroll in the link. Thousands of people got Rickrolled that day. It feels good, man. Not me, my dad. He's entirely convinced my grandmother that the word dinosaur is pronounced dinosaur instead of dinosaur. It's extremely subtle and not really that incorrect, which is why, 1, it was really easy to convince her, and 2, it's been 5 years and she still says it like that. He does this with a new word every year or so. That's simultaneously such a low-level troll, but it still seems so damn mean. Maybe because it's setting up a woman of undisclosed but presumably advanced age for some kind of slightly embarrassing social encounter where she might be too old to unlearn the habit? When the DayZ mod first came out, me and my friends played on a server that was set so that you spawned with nothing but a bandage and had reduced loot spawns in buildings, which made it quite hard for new players to get started. So we'd fly up and down the coast, picking up new players and offering to kit them out, and now in DayZ even a basic pistol is lethal in the right hands. So we'd tell them we're dropping them off at our base, which had some supplies in a crate, which they could load up on and then leave. However, the room they were dropped off into had only a crate filled with empty tin cans and water bottles inside. In order to get out, the player had to answer trivia questions, and an incorrect answer would result in us building another section of wall in the room. 3 wrong answers would result in the final section being placed inside the player, generally crushing them, as the player model would just randomly start breaking bones on the walls as they couldn't move anymore. If they answered right or did something funny, like one guy who was asked to sing a song and began singing Blink-182 songs, they were released outside to find a backpack with food and water and a suppressed M9 and a briefcase full of gold. Most people were pretty good sports about it. My friend convinced me that the past tense of mine was moaned. He also convinced our other friend that the past tense of blind was blound. I worked at Subway and had some trainees, one of whom was just dumb. Nice girl, but dumber than a bag of soup. One day, the toaster oven broke. I'm not sure why, but when she asked, I just said the flux capacitor was broken. She probably told at least 10 customers this before someone else told her. We all had a good laugh about it. Oh my god, I managed to convince a girl in 8th grade that it was impossible for water to exist in a liquid state. Yes, you heard that correctly. About 8 years ago, all Facebook events had attending, maybe, and not attending buttons, and it would show how many people fell into each category. Also at that time, people weren't very good at keeping their events private. I created a Facebook group that eventually amassed about 500 fellow trolls. Every day I'd search on Facebook for party or reception or whatever, and I'd find a private event that was accidentally made public. I'd then send the link to everyone in the group, and we'd all go to the page and click Not Attending. So some kid would be having a birthday party, they invited their entire class, and Facebook would show that 20 people would be attending, 5 people were maybes, and 500 would not be attending. I tricked the whole of Reddit into believing I was a National Geographic photographer doing an Ask Me Anything. It ended up on the front page. I convinced my wife, who never watches game shows, that contestants on Jeopardy have to pay back their debts if they have a negative balance at the end of the game. Well, that's why it's called Jeopardy, right? It's just live TV gambling. It wouldn't be very tense if you didn't have the chance of losing and weren't putting anything on the line. That's why it's such a durable and popular format compared to those other wussy game shows, where all you can do is win. When she said she was going to look it up, I said, "Sure, go ahead, you'll find confirmations, but the show likes to keep it quiet because some puritanical sorts take it amiss." She went around telling people about this for quite a while before she got gently corrected by her brother. Apparently, people didn't want to embarrass her because she was so enthusiastic about it. Yes, I'm a horrible, horrible person. When I was a kid, I successfully convinced my brother's friend that our rabbit was a British kitten. When I told him later that I was just kidding and it was actually a rabbit, he didn't believe me. I'm a submariner in the US Navy. For a dare, I convinced a college-educated girl that I'd hooked up with a few times that she could send me care packages while I was underway. It had to contain items that wouldn't perish, like beef jerky, nuts, or candy, and had to be waterproof. How would it get delivered, you ask? Well, the US Navy has a contract with most aquariums on the coast that deliver packages by whale. It's called US Whale Mail. You package your stuff, you waterproof it, label it with the ship I'm on with my name, and you take it to the aquarium. They attach a group of packages to said whale, which then swims across the world and, quote, hones in on our sonar signal. Our sonar operators hear the whale and go, "Oh, the mail's here," and we surface the ship to detach our packages and enjoy our semi-fresh beef jerky. This girl stopped emailing me a few weeks into my next deployment. I like to imagine the look on the face of the aquarium employee who possibly had to receive the package. I have no idea if she actually did it. She bought it fully while I was there, though. In short, I convinced a girl whales delivered packages to US Navy submarines. That's admittedly a pretty funny way of talking yourself out of ever sleeping with that person ever again. I hope the laugh was worth it. Honestly, I wouldn't have been able to keep a straight face if I was in the room for that lie. During a raid in World of Warcraft, I set up a keybind to only speak with one person. Over the course of 2 hours, I'd periodically whisper the word for the male reproductive organ in a gravelly tone. After saying this several times, the person finally shouts back the word at me a bunch of times, followed by, "We can all hear you." Mind you, there were 38 other people in the group who had no idea what he was talking about. It went completely dead silent, and then someone asked, "What the hell are you talking about?" We spent the next 15 minutes laughing and trying to explain to him what had occurred. This was 2 years ago, and we still tease him about it. I also trolled my oldest child, 13. One night, several hours after he was supposed to be asleep, I noticed a light under his door, so I opened it to check on him. He was sitting on his bed frantic and completely freaked out. I asked him what was going on, and he said, "I was watching adult flicks, and all of a sudden the FBI said they're watching me." I'm trying very hard to keep a straight face as he's telling me this big story about how he has to pay a fee to the FBI or they'd come arrest him. I told him to go to sleep and I'd take care of it. The next morning, I explained to him that I'd spoken to someone from the FBI and they were going to let it go since he's a minor and didn't know any better, but under very specific conditions. Conditions being probation, more or less. He was to be on his best behavior with school and home life, assist with anything that was needed, and after a month, if there was no negative report from his parents, he'd be free and clear. I generally have a very good kid, but for that month, I literally didn't have to do anything around the house. It was wonderful. Once I convinced a girl that the only reason I had good grades is that I had a degenerative disease where the arteries supplying blood to my brain would steadily shrink, and I had to take a medicine every 12 hours so that they didn't close completely. Before the tests, I'd take a double dose, flooding my brain with oxygen and making me very smart. I convinced my mum that narwhals didn't exist. I once told a girl I worked with that someone had sneaked into the building we worked in and painted "Gullible" on the ceiling in bright orange paint. She looked up and said, "There's nothing there." I also looked up and said, "They must have got maintenance to paint over it." She replied, "Well, that makes sense. They wouldn't want to leave it there." The year was 1999. In the 5th grade, I sent an automated message from ICQ to some girl in my grade advising that everyone needed to sign off within the next 5 minutes or else their ICQ account would be deleted. The message ended advising them to pass the message along verbatim. I then sat back and watched as classmate after classmate went offline. I was so proud of myself until a crush of mine told me she has to log off or else ICQ would delete her account. I play CS:GO. Every game I pretend to be a completely brain-dead Russian, which sometimes tilts my opponents off the face of the planet. It's quite a skill. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Back when The Creatures were pretty popular in comparison to how they are now on YouTube, like in 2011-2012, they had this public Minecraft server. They had this YouTube video of being on this server, and they would use commands in the chat to have the server broadcast messages by simply putting /broadcast before their message in chat. I can't believe no one had thought of it before, or that this command was disabled for non-admins. But I used the command to broadcast some really dirty things in chat, like racism, some pretty vulgar, racy stuff, anything edgy that a 14-year-old with power would say, all while making it seem like it was the Creatures doing it. Z and Dans were in at the time and panicking to keep the rampant chat calm. Soon, more and more randoms were learning that somebody was using the /broadcast command and began doing it themselves. The server was in chaos and went down for a few days. There was a guy on World of Warcraft who wouldn't stop coming on to me after he heard my voice in the guild chat, so I got my revenge by telling him about the rare mount the level 3 to 4 kobolds in Fargadeep Mine in Elwyn Forests have a small chance of dropping. He farmed that sucker for days before giving up. I ate 2 goats and a sheep and still managed to get them to pay the toll to cross my bridge. Back in the early days of AOL chat rooms, I used to chat up my 2 teenaged stepsons and get them to ask me out. They thought that I was their age and from their town. As they grew more and more excited by the prospect of hooking up, I'd start making comments about them that I couldn't possibly have known if I were truly a stranger. I used to love watching the moment they realized who I was and typed, "F you, Mom." We laugh about it now. Wait, this implies that this happened more than once. My lord, if that occurred even a single time, it would be enough to scare me off the internet forever. I once convinced my very high sister that we had been sitting in silence for the past half hour, and in fact we had been chatting. I got her to think that she had imagined the entire thing. That's what she gets for eating the last of the ice cream. Okay, a bit of backstory. Several years ago, a program came out called Comipo, which let you create comics using preset characters that you could modify, add text, and add special effects to, and so on. The thing was, it was extremely limited in what it let you do. For example, you couldn't actually create custom poses for your characters, you had to pick a pose from a list of presets, and if there wasn't a pose for what you wanted, tough luck. But the biggest kick in the butt with the program was that it launched in English with version 1.0, while the original Japanese version was on version 1.5 or whatever. The Japanese version had several updates with new, free content, bug fixes, and additional features like 3D object importing, but us English users were left out in the cold. It would be months before we'd start seeing updates, and it wasn't even until years later that we actually had the same version as the Japanese users did. Heck, there was even paid DLC costumes for the Japanese version that they wouldn't even sell to us without several months' delay. So, in short, the program sucked and the people running it sucked even harder. Well, the program was published at the time in English by Crunchyroll. It's since changed hands. Crunchyroll is the official anime streaming site, and they had a big advertising campaign to try and get people to buy Comipo. Of course, this made them very aggressive about deleting negative criticism of Comipo from their forums and the official Comipo Facebook account, which only made the dissatisfied users, myself included, more angry. And then Crunchyroll announced a contest. Entrants had to create a short 10-page comic using Comipo. All winners would receive free premium items, which we assumed was the first DLC costume pack. And the grand prize winner would also get their comic translated to Japanese and posted on the Japanese Comipo website. I knew what I had to do. I had to win this contest. Not for the prizes. Oh no, I didn't really care about the prizes at all. I just wanted to embarrass the ever-loving crap out of Comipo and Crunchyroll, and I knew just how to do it. So on to the troll. I created the most generic, pandering bullcrap comic I could possibly come up with. I studied past winners of the contest run by Crunchyroll, including previous Comipo contests, and I molded a comic out of the most blatantly pandering, generic anime moblob crap that I could possibly come up with. A comic that was, for all intents and purposes, terrible, but what would be exactly what I needed to claim victory. Of course, the comic included a healthy dose of butt-kissing to the Comipo software itself for extra points. The result of this effort was Twin Tail, an 8-page harem romance manga about two twin-tailed twins who wanted to do the deed with the generic manga protagonist. I released Twin Tail to the public via Crunchyroll's official submission forum, and then I waited. After a few weeks, the winners were decided, and what do you know, I won second place. But perhaps you're wondering, what's so funny? Where's the troll? What exactly did I do to Crunchyroll and Comipo? Well, after I received the key for my prize DLC, which didn't even work at first and then turned out to be something they were charging $15 for, that was originally released for the Japanese version for free, then I revealed my terrible secret to the world. The images in Twin Tail are GIF files, and if you wait 4 minutes on a given page, the entire page changes, revealing new dialogue that completely craps on Comipo and Crunchyroll. The angry masses of dissatisfied Comipo owners pretty much declared me a god of trolling after that. I managed to successfully get a fairly large company to declare an entry to their contest, the winner, one that secretly insulted them and their entire fanbase. Within a day, my Crunchyroll account was banned. I was IP banned from making new accounts, although I easily got around it and continued to make new accounts to mock them over the next few days, and the official Comipo Facebook account blocked me and nuked all of the posts of mine they'd ever reposted. My comic was removed from the gallery, mentions of the comic were removed from the contest thread, and anyone who mentioned the incident had their posts deleted from the Crunchyroll forums and their Facebook page. In short, successfully tricked the developers and publishers of a crappy comic-making program into declaring my entry into one of their contests the winner, while secretly insulting them via a comic that changed to say something else if you waited long enough. In retaliation, they banned me and banned all discussion of anything I'd ever posted. Haha, excellent stealth takedown. You can tell that they weren't even taking the submission seriously if they weren't even hovering on any given page for longer than 4 minutes. Way to call them out on it. I convinced my high school girlfriend that the trailblazer was an actual animal that Lewis and Clark discovered on their journey through Oregon. We were at a Portland Trailblazers basketball game for a date, and she kept commenting on how annoyed she was by the mascot. Ugh, what is that thing? Ugh, what's it doing? I said, totally straight-faced, it's a trailblazer. You never read about it? Oh yeah, well, they're extinct now. But when Lewis and Clark were traveling through what we now know as Portland, they actually happened upon it. Anthropologists believe it was something of a wolf-bear hybrid adapted to the wet climate here, and some have speculated that there may be 1 or 2 surviving that actually account for Bigfoot sightings. So she didn't buy it right away, but I kept at it pretty convincingly, and after about 5 minutes, she completely accepted it as fact. Fast forward 6 months, we're at a party with a bunch of our friends, and the Portland Trailblazers come up in conversation. She decides to share this fascinating and little-known fact. Everyone looks at me as she's sharing all of this complete nonsense, basically verbatim from what I told her, and we all just die laughing. A breakup ensued shortly after. In nursing school, I convinced a ditzy blonde girl that there was such a thing as cranial reflex, and she let me hit her in the head with a reflex hammer to test it out. Convincing everyone in a GTA 5 lobby that I was a 27-year-old Indian immigrant from New Delhi and that I was bartending for my uncle who owned a hotel in Tampa. I kept up the voice impression and story for an hour or more. The people there legitimately believed everything I said. Maybe not at first, but by the end they did. I broke the horrible news to them right before I left. They were so devastated. I told the new guy at work to top up the pressure in the forklift tires. They're solid rubber, by the way. After he spent about 30 minutes doing God knows what, he came up and said he couldn't find the right fitting for the air hose, so I told him to check the basement. There was no basement in our building. He wasted almost half of his day looking for crap that didn't exist. He also cut a piece of plywood too short and asked for help. I told him to go and ask the boss for the board stretcher. From my experience, trolls aren't very useful. Well, maybe as frontline troops. They're dumb as all hell, but they can take a beating, and you really don't care when they die. Not that I'd care anyway, but bygones are bygones. I've got one pointy tooth, it's my canine, and I had a girl convinced for over an hour that I was half vampire. I'm originally from a place called Saskatchewan. It's not really hard to pronounce, it's just like it's spelled, but if you haven't heard it a lot, it can be intimidating to try and read out loud. I briefly moved to Portland, Oregon, and whenever anyone would try to say it, usually correct or very close, I'd always say, "So close, just a little bit off," and they'd try again with a random inflection. I had one woman going every week or so for the entire year and a half that we both lived there. One time I broke into the bathroom of this really crazy school. I was having a good time until some punk with round glasses and his ginger sidekick shoved a wand into my nose and I passed out from the pain. 3 out of 10 wouldn't recommend. I'm in the dumb math class, so I'll just name a few I've managed to pull off this month. The first one was convincing literally over half the class that there were 14 original colonies, not 30. This was especially good as we'd been studying American history and learning about the start of the US. On Tuesday, December 13th, my teacher asked for the date and everyone obviously said, the 13th. So I gasped and said, "It's Friday the 13th!" A girl in front of me screamed, "Oh my god, really?" And after a good 30 seconds, someone said something along the lines of, "It's Tuesday." To which the girl turned around and said, "Don't play me like that." I think I've convinced a couple of family members that potatoes are responsible for 1% of the deaths in the US. What gross, crazy shenanigans happen in the McDonald's play pit. I found a pair of rusty scissors in the ball pit when I was 6. Gave them to a staff member and got a free ice cream. I know now that it was likely a bribe to keep me quiet. You know what? My experiences weren't bad at all. I found like 4 original Game Boy games in the ball pit once, games including Tetris and Donkey Kong. Some kid smeared his number 2 on the inside of the tube. Had to call in a cleaning company to take care of it. An old couple were with their grandchild. They sat down at one of the tables that had the tubes running over it. The kid went wee-wee in the tunnels above, and it dripped down all over the old people and their food. I swear to God, whenever I went to one of those tubular germ factories as a kid, there were always mysterious yellow-green puddles, or at least the faint smell of wee-wee and whatever crappy disinfectant the poor employee who had to squeeze himself into the thing had used. Never stopped me from going into them, though. A lady left her 2 young children in the play place 4 hours while she went to the thrift store shopping. Eventually, a nice old woman came in and told me they were there and didn't seem to have a guardian present. So of course, I called the cops. When she finally returned, she admitted that she does it a few times a week. Another time, I was getting ready to lock up for the night and I noticed smoke coming from under the hood of the play place. I was quite surprised to find 4 older men smoking green herb and cigarettes, sliding and giggling. Some fricking kid climbed all the way to the top of the slide and took down his gosh darn pants and slid down the slide. The problem was he made brown the whole way down. There was a fricking trail of crap spanning the entire second half of the slide. We only found out because some other fricking kid slid down the slide and came out covered in chunky liquid chocolate and crying uncontrollably. Look, viewer, you knew when you clicked on this video that the story was going to be more than 50% children's bodily emissions, didn't you? Neither of us are surprised, although I will admit that the image of the kid leaving a snail trail all the way down has got me laughing out loud in public while I write the script of the video. Kids are awesome, in a really, really messed up way. Our play place was replaced with video games and a giant crawl-in Happy Meal box quite a few years back. It's all in a glass room. The place is disgusting. Children leave food in there, they spew, and even go to the bathroom. Also, quite a few employees have hooked up in the giant Happy Meal box. I feel that our bathrooms are much cleaner. I mean, I hope so. That's where I've been eating my meals. I will now tell the story of the best thing I ever saw in Playland. This was at Burger King, not McDonald's. In the South, these things are simply called Playland. A few years ago, me and my kids were eating at Burger King, and of course we had to eat in Playland because kids. Burger King had at this time installed talking garbage cans in there. It was probably intended as a way to get kids to throw their own trash away so employees wouldn't have to do it so much. Whoever designed those things knew nothing about children. When you put trash into the talking trash can, pushing your garbage in past that plastic spring-loaded flap which says "thank you" on it, The trash can would then say, "Thanks for the garbage," or something like that. You know, things a talking trash can would say. Any parent could tell you what would happen next. Children do in fact know that trash cans cannot actually speak. So each successive child, having been congratulated by the trash can, would do the obvious thing and put his head inside the trash to see who's in there. Then the spring-loaded "thank you" flap would swing shut and grab the children by the neck in the manner of a squirrel trap, and they couldn't get their heads back out, and there would be flailing and muffled screaming, and they'd have to be rescued by mommy. This happened over and over and over. Kids of a certain age would put their heads in a talking trash can, even if they just saw the last kid get garroted by it. It kinda makes them even more curious. Just one kid after another getting choked by this evil instrument of torture. "Thanks for the trash." It was the best thing I've ever seen. Kids leave, new kids take their place, new victims for the magic trash can. I never got tired of it. Next time we went to Burger King, there weren't any more, but I hope someday they'll come back for another try. Thanks for the listen! I really want to see the face of the brilliant guy in corporate who thought of this when he's shown a video of kids getting their heads stuck in the trash can. Two teens hid in the ball pits and just went at it. Unsanitary as heck, but I guess teens will do it anywhere. My aunt got stuck in that spiral slide once. And yes, my aunt. She was about 40 at the time. I'm not really sure why she decided to go down the slide, but she did, and she didn't fit. They had to shut the play place down and call someone to pull her out. I had this large kid get stuck in it, and when I was sent to pull him out, I got sued for reckless endangerment of a child and inappropriate contact with a child. I seriously wanted to punch the parents. The frickers got me fired and held up in court for 3 months. Kids literally take their Happy Meals in there and just forget. Heavier things are always at the bottom, like cheeseburgers, then there's a layer of chicken McNuggets and such. 50% of the ball pit is in fact edible, 25% balls, 25% kids number 2. Whether or not the doo-doo is more or less dense than the nuggets depends on their diet, I guess. I'm not an employee, but when I was a kid, I was climbing in and out of the play place. I was getting pretty tired, so I decided to take a little break inside one of the tubes. I noticed a whole bunch of flies and decided to follow them. Turns out there was a dead iguana that was just rotting away inside the tube. I was crawling over it the whole time without realizing it. A kid had the runs in one of those cars at the top. Well, he thought it'd be a good idea to take the slide down to tell his mum that he'd gone boom boom. I had to go up in there, clean out the car with a crap ton of rags and a bucket of sanitizer. Then I had to clean the trail of smears that went down the slide. I quit immediately after when I learned I wasn't supposed to be the one cleaning that stuff up. You know, this thread is making me feel better. One time, my son went doo-doo in the play area. When I realized it, I went and cleaned it up. Before I was done, someone told the staff about it. So I'm there cleaning it up, and then I see a McDonald's employee. I said, "Don't worry about it, I got it all." And he said, "Wow, thanks, that's the first time that's happened." Feeling embarrassed, I said, "The first time a kid has went number 2 in the playground?" "Oh, heck no," he said. "That happens about once a week. This is the first time a parent has cleaned it up themselves." That was enough to make me change my mind on how much McDonald's employees deserve to get paid. Sheesh. As a former slave of the Golden Arches, thank you. And yes, you might be one of the first people I've heard of in history to do this. Have you ever taken pity on us teenage, pimply custodians of the playpen before? Sound off in the comments to let us know, and we'll testify for you at the gates of heaven. Never seen any crap at McDonald's, but as a parent I can confirm the play place is full of fricking turds. Raise your kids better, McParents. Not quite McDonald's, but I worked at an indoor playground where we had a big version of the play place complete with a ball pit and inflatables. A 7-year-old was running and going number 2 at the same time, leaving a long streak of half-solid excrement across the arena, which resulted in little mud tracks leading to every part of the facility. Another time we had our toilets back up due to a clog in the main line. When the plumber opened up the drain to check it out, a crap geyser proceeded to erupt about 3 feet in the air, flooding the bathroom with about 2 inches of standing sewage. Not to mention, this was the women's bathroom. When asked to clean it, both employees quit. Being manager, I was left to deal with the aftermath. I have countless stories involving every form of human excretion at this place. We even had a death occur on site, which I can't go into. After that, though, employees always rumored about the ghost which would cry at night if you stayed long enough and would move around toys. We had all of these incidents caught on camera, but I no longer work there for what should be obvious reasons. A kid threw up and proceeded to pick up fistfuls of chunks and throw them at other children, who then followed his initial example. Ugh. We closed the play place for like 2 weeks to have the whole thing heavy-duty cleaned and sterilized by a hired-out company. A woman got angry that her kids couldn't play. She yelled, "I'll show you, clean!" ripped the hazard tape off the door, broke the lock on said door, and proceeded to put her finger down her throat and add to the mess. That was right before I quit. The last thing I heard, she was trying to sue our owner, stating that the chemicals in the play place, which she broke into, made her ill, so she was hospitalized. Not McDonald's, but I worked at a Discovery Zone kind of place in high school. Once a month on Sunday nights, we would host middle school dances. The older teens or whatever could show up and do whatever they wanted without the little kids around. There was always a pretty decent turnout. I saw the following things. People getting handies in the laser tag maze. People getting handies in the ball pits. Pretty much just people getting handies everywhere. For a while, a kid from the ghetto JH ran regular dice games that took place on one of the pool tables. I generally just let this happen. Unused rubbers in the quarter and token return in every single arcade game. A girl blew chunks down the slide leading to the ball pit. We figured she was drunk and she got arrested. A girl and a boy came out wearing each other's clothes after a game of laser tag. And unrelated, but my favorite, there was this slightly chubby, awkward, nerdy-looking kid there by himself, not really socializing. I think his parents made him come. I gave a group of girls a ton of tokens, free pizza coupons, free entrance passes, etc. just to go talk to him. By the end of the night, you could see him come out of his shell. He continued to come to the dances and was a social machine after that. I liked to think I changed that kid's life somehow. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It started as a fairly average Monday morning. Began my shift as usual and watched over the kids. For the most part, there weren't too many incidents. A couple of kids got into a small fight, but we usually don't step in unless it's anything serious. Anyway, it was getting kind of late and I only had an hour left. 2 kids got into a pretty big argument with lots of hair pulling and pushing. I was feeling pretty tired that day, probably still hungover from the night before. Didn't really bother to do anything because it just looked like their parents noticed anyway. One of the kids was fairly older than the other one, and the mother of the younger kid was pretty angry that her kid was being bullied. The mother of the older kid was your typical lazy parent who doesn't give a crap about what their child gets up to and insisted that it just wasn't her problem. Now, the mother of the younger kid looked extremely angry before they'd even begun to talk. I could visibly see her face growing redder and redder as each second passed. She told the other mum that she should bother to raise her kid properly and said that her daughter should give her child an apology. The mother just shrugged it off and turned away. Apparently, the mother of the younger girl didn't like that because within seconds, she had grabbed her by the hair and slammed her face into one of the plastic slides. The rest of the kids simply watched in horror as the mother proceeds to push the other woman headfirst into the ball pit while desperately trying to kick her in the head. The last thing I saw, she jumped up and tried to elbow drop her pro wrestling style. Quickly got my manager to call the police. The mother was thrown into the police car, and I'm pretty sure they had to get an ambulance for the other woman. Needless to say, the play place was closed early that day. They didn't reopen it for almost a week. You know, I'm of 2 minds about this. On the one hand, these are both opposite ends of the spectrum in a lesson on how not to be parents. On the other hand, this would be something you told your friends about the second you went to school the next day. These crappy moms probably made a whole bunch of kids' days. Thanks, morons. I can recall one time our shake machine wasn't running well. The shakes would come out very slow. They took forever to fill the cup. It was like that for quite a while. When they finally brought someone in to take it apart, he discovered a cockroach in the shake tube. All the shakes we'd been serving were filtered through that roach. Some little kid went number 2 in the twisty slide, and it was in the middle, so the kids at the top couldn't see it. So kids would slide unknowingly into a makeshift crap and slide and get crap on their backs, faces, back of their heads, hands. It was horrendously disgusting. Worst day of my life. I used to work at McDonald's with a bunch of friends in my neighborhood. Every time someone hurled in the play place, we always chose the same friend to clean it up. We used to make fun of him all the time for that. One time, a fat kid, not just kind of chubby but morbidly obese 200 to 300 pound 12-year-old, decided he wanted to go in. I saw him go in. About 2 to 5 minutes later, I hear crying coming from the tubes. Apparently, the kid got stuck. Hard times at the play place. We got a call from Central Dispatch. They asked me to check on a tripped alarm at the local Mickey D's. It wasn't a big play place, only about a 2 on the Ronald scale, but I had a feeling something significant was just waiting to happen. The big surprise, though, was that nothing happened until I looked into the double exterior slide. A small girl, only about 5 or 7 years old, clutching a greasy takeout bag. It looked heavy, plump, full of the unknown. I took the girl inside to the kids section and asked her a couple of questions. She was homeless, got forced to rob the place by her street friends. She thought it'd be an easy job. When I looked into the bag to see what the loot was, I was taken aback. McNuggets. Patrolling the McDonald's almost makes me wish for a nuclear winter. My sister had to clean number 1 that ran from the top of the slide to the bottom. She started at the top like an idiot and lost her footing. McCraphole's employee here. No play place at my location, but I'm going to vent about mostly irrelevant things so you all have some insight about working in fast food. Lunch rush, 8-hour shift, hungover as frick working the register. People ordering Happy Meals and not specifying which Happy Meal. Just frickin' saying, a Happy Meal. Me? Which Happy Meal would you like? The parent bends down to their child to ask. The child mumbles, hides head in shame. Meanwhile, the line is growing and the customers are getting more disgruntled. A bead of sweat begins to form on my brow as the mother tells her child to tell me which meal. An eternity elapses before mere infant utters its first, incomprehensible words. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Once again, the child mutters something in Gaelic. I'm sorry, didn't quite get that. Small baby babbles, the parent won't help them out. Time to take a guess. I order a large sweet tea, 3 McDoubles, and a large fries. She's watching her weight and she asks for no salt on the fries and sees no irony in this at all. We have to make a whole new batch of fries for this one request. She stops talking. I say, will that be all for you? She says yes, but what she meant to say was no, because she continues to order more food almost as soon as I press the Pay Now button on the register. She orders more lard for herself. All right, will that be for here or to go? She looks to the child, gazes towards the dining room, looks up for something, anything, she just wants a sign, I guess. For go. My brain has now melted. Blood is now trickling out of my ear. There's no for go button on my register, so I make a guess once again. I know there's no way I've gotten this order correct. I accept defeat. Alright, that'll be $23.67. The woman's face drops. The room is absolutely silent except for the racing beat of my heart. I thought sweet teas were $1. They used to be $1 all over the country. Her rage is building as I stutter. Well, they used to be, but now they're $1.19. That extra 19 cents is blood money in this business. Nostrils flare, an angry sigh. She wants me to change the price even though I'm clearly a minimum wage employee, not the CEO of McDonald's. You people are robbing us blind. The woman has mistaken me for a commissioned salesperson instead of a cashier. She now proceeds to go through the price of every item she's ordered, only to find that yes, indeed, our register is capable of simple addition. She hands me a 20, 3 ones, and a bucket of change that somehow only amounts to 65 cents. I'm sorry, I still need 2 more cents. She rolls her eyes but forks it over. Alright, your order number will be 267. The order has taken all but maybe 2-3 minutes tops, but by now the once orderly line has turned into an impatient mob. They feel hunger, not for McChickens or those precious McNuggets, but for blood. I, on the other hand, thirst for liberation. My lips manage to bend awkwardly into a smile as I say, I can help whoever's next. A large man walks over and O Fortuna begins playing. Are you guys still serving breakfast? It's 2 p.m., sir. Oh, all right then. I'll just have a shamrock shake. It is December. Like the author said, this is not a play pit story, but I've run out of things to say about kids going boom boom in the ball pit, and felt inclined to include the story of the daily misery that those who work at this place feel every day. Solidarity, Comrade McD's employee. Not an employee and not from McDonald's, but one time road tripping up Vancouver Island with my brother and stepmom, we stopped for lunch at a Burger King in that town with the giant hockey stick and puck in front of the arena. So my brother and I, about 12 and 10 respectively, scarfed down our meals and started exploring the play area. Now, this wasn't your average play place, it was huge, and they had these weird, child-sized, hard stuffed animals attached to the floor with Velcro. I don't know who came up with them or how they were meant to be played with, but they resembled a harder, lighter punching bag in texture. Back to the story though. Our stepmom sat below, finishing her food while she glanced upwards every now and again to make sure we were okay. My brother and I soon parted ways in the massive labyrinthian structure. Sometime later, a random kid and I squeezed past each other while crossing paths in one of the tubes. As soon as we were clear, he glared back at me and growled, "You touch me again and I'll slit your frickin' throat." Now, this kid couldn't have been any older than me, so you understand my shock at hearing this uttered by a child no older than 10. As if he even had a weapon. He was gone before I could process what he said, and I didn't retort. Oh well, back to playing. I guess some kids are just crazy. Sometime later, my brother and I met at the top of the spiral slide. Being that he got there before me, he went down first. As I'm sliding down the spiral, I hear an argument unfolding below. As I emerge from the bottom of the play place, the scene became clear. Psycho Kid was all up in my brother's face, screaming unintelligible obscenities. I guess the little crap took his time getting off the slide and my brother slid right into him. The kid is getting more and more aggressive, screaming louder and getting physical, shoving my brother's chest like little jerks always do when they want to intimidate. My brother, who I'll point out is a head taller than this frickin' delinquent, is keeping his cool and trying to tell the crap to F off. The kid's dad is nearby and get this, the hick greaseball mumbers, "You tell him, Jimmy," in between mouthfuls of a Whopper. A couple of things went through my head before I acted. The kid's unfortunate excuse for a father couldn't care less if the world ended tomorrow. My brother can't as well beat this younger jerk without some kind of repercussion. My approaching stepmom is a good 5 to 10 seconds away on the other side of the play area, and I need to reassert my dominance over this hillbilly spawn whose best experience with violence probably comes from WCW or the crappy example his dad set to him. The kid didn't see me coming. I ripped a nearby giant duck from its Velcro binding and brandished it by the tail, charging towards the violent little brat. I don't even think he turned around at all. The first blow hit him square in the back, with all my weight behind it. He tumbled onto the floor in front of my brother, gasping for air. I guess I knocked the wind out of him. But I wasn't finished. "Slit my fricking throat, will you?" I shouted with every swing, each strike harder than the last. He was crying for his daddy by the time my stepmom dragged us away. She was about to end the trip early before we explained the situation. In the end, she decided to not punish me, gave a heavy sigh, and chalked it up to another case of small-town madness. I don't work at McDonald's, but one time I was playing in the ball pit and came across a turd. Ridiculous. Today I learned never to go to the McDonald's play place, or at least check everywhere I take a step or sit. People of the internet, when were you witness to life's craziest phenomenons? Once, my sister lost the lunch check she was supposed to turn into the office at school. Later that day, she found another girl's lunch check on the ground and decided to do the good deed and turn it into the office for her. When my sister got to the office, though, the girl whose check she'd found was there, also turning in my sister's check that she had found on the ground earlier that day. Honestly, the thing that I thought I would never see was a mother's tearful rendition of "You Are My Sunshine." This was at the funeral of her young adult son, who had decided he didn't want to be alive anymore in his room a few weeks after Christmas. This was made even more sad by the fact that she had previously lost a child to sudden infant death syndrome. When I was really young, I'd ask my dad if I was his real son because I was Asian and he was white. He'd always tell me that he was my dad and I was his son. I wouldn't bring it up too often, but for some reason, the thought just itched at the back of my mind. Fast forward to my first year at college. I meet my biological mother, and she tells me that my dad isn't my biological father, and that I was actually the son of one of my dad's friends from the Navy. My dad didn't find out until I was about 5, and afterward he decided to raise me in spite of my mother cheating on him. He's always been my dad. There was so much that had happened to lead up to his decision to continue raising me alone. I have an enormous respect for him. Now that I'm an adult, I can see that not many people would have taken the road he took. He decided that he had a moral obligation to keep raising me, and he wrestled with the legal system back when there weren't many rights for single dads. On the flip side, I also love my mother because in the end she realized that she wasn't capable of raising me, and relinquished full custody to my dad. You know what's crazy is that my story isn't even unique. So many people have had crazy family drama. It really puts it in perspective. My husband is a high school football coach, and the first game of the season is tomorrow. He's already been offered money, bedroom favors, and free yard work from parents as long as he starts their kid. He isn't even the head coach. Our oldest son is on the team, and my husband likes to point out that our son doesn't always start either. I really hate parents. It's high school. It's time to cut the cord. If your kid isn't good, they likely won't be on the field much. What the actual frick? Is this Texas? Because I know that football is more important than food there, but my god, some of these folks are taking it way too seriously even for that state. So many questions. What social class is the school? How bad are their kids? What is on the line for them to offer these things? I work in retail sales, selling pretty common technology. You meet all sorts of people. People who are weird, people who are cool, people who are absolute jerks. I've made friends with my customers a few times, although I usually keep everything on my work phone. No Facebook messages or hangouts. I've grown up and currently work in Texas. A wonderful place. I met a nice older lady at work who I'll call Mrs. Texas. She was always decked out. Texas purse, Texas boots, Texas nails, the whole deal. She bought her tech somewhere else and, like most people her age, had a billion questions. She got sold something that's pretty crappy and got tired of the people who ripped her off. Mrs. Texas came to my store and I started helping her out. I'd say probably once a month for about a year, she'd come in and I'd need to fix what she had. Nothing too major, just reorganization things and telling her everything's good to go. We'd chat a little bit. One time, her tech suddenly reset in my hands. I felt guilty, although I knew I did nothing wrong. She lost pictures of her dog that had just passed away. Most people would cuss me apart and I'd have to kick them out for things like this. She was upset, but not at me. Great frickin' lady. She started having a few surgeries on her eyes. They didn't heal at all. It really stressed her out and slowed her down. The last time I saw her in the store, she could barely see. 2 days ago, I got a phone call from Mrs. Texas. She said it was important and asked me to call her back. Hey, I mean, usually, frick customers and their tech questions once I'm off my shift, right? But I called Mrs. Texas. She explained that she had recently fallen and broken her arm. After sitting in the hospital for some time, her liver and kidneys gave out. She lost a ton of weight and knew her time was coming. The conversation was weird, but she was so calm. She told me she was going to die soon and wanted to thank me for being such a nice guy. Mrs. Texas called me on her fricking deathbed to thank me for simply doing my job. I bought her some flowers and went to her house today, talked for a while and said goodbye. She was as happy as someone who knew their time was coming could be. Mrs. Texas will probably pass soon. I've said my goodbyes and thanked her for blessing my life. Sorry for being such a downer, I just really wanted to post this and I didn't know where else to go. I'm a preschool teacher. One of my students sheepishly asked me if it was okay to ask me a question. I, of course, assured her she can always ask me anything on her mind. She then says, "Only mamas can say mother fricker, right?" After sucking my entire face in to prevent myself from laughing, I confirm, yes, only mamas. Not really a story, more of a question. I didn't know where else to go. I worked with the guy who has severe autism. Whenever I come in, I always cheerfully say, "Hi, Johnny." Obviously, because of his condition, he never responds. In fact, he doesn't look at me, change his facial expression, or do anything to indicate he heard me. But sometimes I'll ask him how he is and he'll look at me in the eye and quietly say, "Good." Other times, he will come up to me and strike up a conversation with me at his own volition. Or if I ask him questions, he'll answer. A lot of times, I'll joke around with him and I can make him laugh. But this is my question. Is there a chance that I'm bothering him by saying hi to him? Might he just want to be left alone? Or does he maybe appreciate people saying hi to him even though he can't respond? I've never worked closely with anyone who has autism, so I don't know what their preferences are with certain situations such as this one. My brother is autistic, and all cases are very different, but it seems like a common thing is that they need predictability. I'd say just to make sure you make a routine with the way you interact with him and he'll feel much more comfortable. My wife is a therapist who works with neurodivergent children, and my brother absolutely loves her. She always greets him the same, and I always notice him open up when she's talking to him. Thanks for being kind. Yeah, this is a complete guess, but if he starts conversations with you of his own volition, you make him laugh and he doesn't react negatively when you say hi, he doesn't mind a bit. You might even be his good buddy. I frequently walk my dog at a ravine near my house in Toronto. On more than one occasion, a Chinese tour bus has pulled up and flooded the ravine with old Asian women who proceed to take pictures of me and my dog. Sometimes when I'm feeling down, I just think that somewhere I'm in some old Asian woman's slideshow. I smuggled 2 illegal workers out of my job and drove them to the airport and bought them plane tickets so they could get back home. The job was at a summer camp and they lived in the staff house on the property and didn't have cars in the US, so they were just stuck there all day every day, being taken advantage of and overworked, and one day they broke down. And I was like, alright, let's do this. I got fired the next day. I mean, I'm sure that they had to write a fake bullcrap reason on why they were firing you, but part of my brain likes to think that your old workplace gave you a pink slip saying, "They smuggled out our illegal labor slaves, meaning that now we have to pay for workers or find more." Regardless of my silly musings, well done. You did a great thing for those people. So, my sophomore year of college, my roommates and I had the best thing happen ever. I lived in a house with 7 of my good buds. It was a big state college, fun college town. We had a really crazy time, but this was the cherry on top. In the last 2 weeks of our lease, a guy just knocks on our door saying that they're scouting locations for a TV pilot to film a scene. 2 days later, he informs us that they want to use our house. The show's working title is Migilantes, featuring a gang of little people that defend other little people from persecution. Despite the questionable political correctness of the show's title, we accept. They give us $300, which immediately went to alcohol, and the only thing they needed from us was to throw a party. Easy. We invite all of our friends over, and all that were convinced it wasn't bullcrap showed up. The premise of the scene, and keep in mind that this is a, quote, reality show, was that the attendees of this college party, who were all actors, were harassing a little person and going to throw him around the house, when all of a sudden, here come the Migilantes. They burst through the front door as we're all chanting, "Toss! Toss! Toss!" and start to beat the crap out of the evil partygoers. This involves them pinning them down and pulling their pants down and then sitting on them. The whole scene is absolute chaos as my friends and I are cheering on the debauchery for the several takes that they do. Once it's all over, my buddies and I are sharing drinks with the gang of little people, and one of them even went out with us the next night. I've told this story countless times, and thankfully I still have a few photos and videos to validate that it actually happened, otherwise there's no way anyone would believe me. Last I heard, the show wasn't picked up because the network didn't think that the Migilantes were doing a good job of defending against persecution by just beating people up. I haven't seen the footage, but I would pay a pretty penny to get a hold of it. Anyway, been wanting to share my story for a while now. Just not sure where it fit. My grandmother was murdered by her caregiver on the 17th of June 2016. The caregiver hit her in the head with a hammer, dismembered her, put her body parts in trash bags, drove them about 2 hours across the state line, and dumped them in the middle of the night. She burned all of the bedding, her purse, and tried to set some of the parts on fire. On the 21st of the same month, the detectives interrogated the caregiver with evidence they'd collected. She gave a partial confession and told them where the body parts were. My mum is really struggling. I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks, leaving Sunday, which has been planned for a while, and we're leaving the country. I feel guilty because my mum is struggling and I'm excited about vacation. I feel guilty that I'm not struggling with everything the same way my mum is. I could write for an hour and still not give you all the details of the crazy stuff that happened with my grandmother's murder, or process all of my feelings. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I grew up in a really small town. Everyone knew everyone. I wasn't very well liked by a lot of the kids in my school, and as a result, I was bullied. I got my first boyfriend when I was 16. I'd wanted so desperately to be liked because I felt so alone since my grandfather, who raised me, had died a month before. So I did any and everything he wanted. I was pregnant within a month. I was so embarrassed I dropped out of school. My boyfriend then cheated on me. My grandmother kicked me out. I lost the baby. My boyfriend's sister started a rumor that I'd never actually been pregnant and had lied about the entire thing, and being that I hadn't been very far along before I lost the kid, pretty much everyone in town believed her. I became the laughingstock of my hometown, so I left. I briefly lived with my mother a state over when I was 17. The entire reason I'd been raised by my grandparents was because my mother was not capable of looking after a child, so as you can imagine, when I moved over there at 17, things did not go well between her and I. I lived with her for maybe 2 weeks, and then I met Trey, and he really saved me from the hell that was my life. When we got together, he did everything in his power to get me away from my mother. He and his parents came up with an arrangement. I could live with them and continue to be in a relationship with Trey, but we had to sleep in separate rooms. Trey's parents are very religious, so this is how they justified allowing their son's girlfriend to live with them. All they asked for in exchange was for me to help out around the house. So I did. I got a job and started paying rent. I got my GED and my CNA. I worked as a CNA at a long-term care facility, and also as a shift manager at a local convenience store. Trey and I got engaged. We've been married for 2 years now. We have our own place, a ferret, and a new puppy. I no longer work as a CNA or a manager. Currently, I'm a waitress and I love it. Trey is finishing his last year in college as an education major and is in a band that plays paying gigs and has a sizable fan base. I'm pursuing my writing and considering going to college. We can pay our bills and do so on time. I have a home now, and a husband and a family. And really, there's no moral to the story, it's just amazing to see how far I've come in 4 years. And please consider what I'm about to say. No matter how dark your days may become, don't ever give up. Even when you feel like you're at your wit's end and you don't have the strength to move forward, make every effort to continue on. I know what it's like to feel like you have no will to move forward. I know what it's like to feel like death would be a sweet release from what you're living in, but it can get better and it will. I can promise you that. When I was 16, I never imagined that at the age of 20, my life would be completely turned around. I never thought I'd find love. I never thought I'd see a day where I didn't want to give up. I never imagined I'd even live to see 20, but I did. And my life, though not without imperfections, is one I'd never dreamed I'd have. Thank you for sharing. I know due to the nature of the question that this would be a pretty mixed bunch of replies, but stories like this really do inspire and encourage me that there's always a way out of even the darkest of life's pits. I hope you and your partner and ferret are well. One time I ate 26 chocolate chip cookies because I was mad at my little sister and didn't want her to have any. I then proceeded to throw them up all over the place. I was pretty much a toddler at the time. My parents had brought a brand new inflatable boat for a few $100s. They'd fully inflated the boat and we were testing it out in the backyard. While they were sitting in it, I went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, went back to the backyard and stabbed the boat right in front of them. What followed was a tumultuous couple of hours. I just came back home after 6 weeks to discover that at some point during that time, the breakers tripped and the house was without electricity for a long time. You can imagine what happened to the freezer, but you probably can't imagine the smell. I am not looking forward to cleaning that up tomorrow. Okay, update, I'm about 3/4 done with the crap. It's not nearly as bad as I feared, but it was still pretty nasty. All you people who keep saying that the smell will never come out and I should just replace the freezer, you all need more bleach in your lives. One time I went to Maine and lobsters were only about $3, so I ate 5 of them and then chucked them up all over the lawn. You know, this whole group of stories is just such a frickin' roller coaster. Jesus Christ! A year and a half ago, I was an active alcoholic who spent his day working with kids and his nights drinking to black out or pass out. I hated my job and myself. My New Year's resolution in 2015 was to start a business a month for a year and hope that one of them stuck. Mostly, I just wanted to make myself face that fear of failure head on. It's now 20 months later. I'm sober, I've lost weight, I've reconnected with my family, and I managed to try 5 businesses before the 6th one stuck. I moved home and run a jelly company while I start my MBA. Seriously, I'm writing this right now as the new batch boils away and my 3rd employee runs the dishes. The point is, fear sucks. Face it hard and you'll be much happier. My best friend was diagnosed with esophageal cancer around April of 2014. He called me the minute he was diagnosed. I live in the Midwest and he had moved to the West Coast, and he told me the outlook was really bad. He had noticed something wrong the prior Thanksgiving, difficulty swallowing, the feeling of something in his throat that never went down with water or more food. When he was diagnosed, he began treatments almost immediately. Things got worse before they got better. His wife would give me updates as much as she could. She started working as much as she could because he got to where he had good days and bad days. One of our chats had him excited about the fact that he could concentrate his efforts on his artistic abilities while taking time off work. I coaxed him into creating a tattoo design for me that would represent my daughter in an abstract form. He did so after a month or two and sent me a picture of the design, and I loved it. He was cleared to fly home to where I live in August of that year after some intense chemo. He was doing really well and the doctors had great hopes. We had a good time, he got to meet my daughter for the second time, and it was just like the old days. He died on December 27th of that year. The virus had spread to his abdomen and he couldn't handle it. His wife called me a week before saying that she wasn't sure he'd last much longer. Work was slow at the time, and having a young daughter, along with a wife who was staying home full-time, made it borderline impossible to leave, let alone afford a $1,000 plane ticket. The night he passed, her friends were scraping airline miles together to get me out there. I still miss him like crazy. I still have the voicemail he left me that fall on my phone. I still feel it randomly at the end of my new VMs, and it's nice to hear. Even though I know that he knew, it still stings that I didn't get one more conversation with him. I'm getting into shape to have the tattoo done this year. After a lengthy divorce and separation, along with the bills and everything that comes with that, I'm finally in a place to get it done how I want. Hopefully, come November, I'll have the greatest tattoo I'll ever get. That's the story I needed to tell. Thank you for listening. I had this janitor in middle school. When I think about it now, he was severely autistic. I thought he was a teen who worked for the school. Turns out he was almost 40 at the time. All the faculty and students treated him as a kid and always praised how he was the best at his job. Cleaning spills and taking kids to the loo, helping get papers around. He once saw me steal chalk out of the teacher's lounge. And I know, I'm talking about when I was 10. I remember his face. He was conflicted. He was upset, but he never told any of the teachers. The next 3 days, he comes up to me, and I got super scared thinking that he's going to rat me out. He gives me 3 full pieces of chalk, unlike the broken scraps I was nicking from the lounge, and he walks away without saying anything. I made a point to say hi every day. He never really replied, and I remember he had difficulty with eye contact, but he'd always have chalk. While working my campus job, I once had a girl try to go number 2 out of the window of a moving van, and it was still during training. My trainer just said, "Ah, frick, not this again." When I was in 3rd grade, I was chilling in the bathroom. A kid walks in and pulls out a pack of gum. I said, "Can I have a piece?" And he said, "Sure." Another kid named Preston walks from behind and asked the same thing to the gum kid. The gum kid said that was his last piece. Preston turns to me and offered me $1 for my piece. I weighed out my options and decided to give the gum to Preston. The next day I see Preston and I say, "Hey, did you bring my $1?" He says, "No." The next day I come up to him and ask him the same question. He says, "I'll bring it next week." I'm starting to get annoyed, getting angry at myself for giving him the gum. The next week comes, I ask him again, and he says, "In 4th grade." Now he thinks it's a frickin' game. Little does he know I'm very persistent. Every couple of days I'd remind him and he'd say the same thing. "In 4th grade." The first day of 4th grade, I come and find him. I ask him again, "Where's my $1?" He bumps it up another year, saying, 5th grade. Again, I bug him every couple of days. Now, this went on for a couple of years. In 6th grade, he said he'd give it to me in junior high. In junior high, he said he'd give it to me in high school. And in high school, he said on graduation. Now, I'm holding him to this. We'll most likely never see each other again after that, so it's then or never. 3 years later, it's graduation day, 9 days since I gave him the gum. I walked, got my diploma, everything was going great, but in the back of my mind, I know the actual goal for the day is getting my fricking $1. I walk through crowds of people, still can't find him. Just as I'm about to give up, I look over and Preston is standing there, holding the $1. My eyes light up. I finally got my $1. I grab it, hold it in the air, and yell. I give him a big hug and he told me, "Dylan, that gum was fricking delicious." And we parted ways. I jumped off a moving train once. Was hanging out with a friend and thought it'd be fun to climb on a train. Well, the train started moving and I'm still sitting on the side. I knew I'd have to get off, but I'm scared to jump. But the speed keeps building up. After maybe 30 seconds, and it felt like an hour, I told myself I have to get off or it'll just keep building speed. So I build up my courage, spot a grassy patch ahead, and totally parkour dive off. Like parallel with the ground, movie-style dive. I land on my side, roll a crap ton of times, and stand up. I immediately check myself for injuries, find none, and search for my phone. It's lost, and also I think I heard it shatter. My friend runs up, terrified. I went like a mile down the tracks. Well, it doesn't end there. We're walking back, I'm cut up and bloody when a cop car shows up. The officer gets out, looks at me and says, "Son, did you jump off a train?" Long story short, someone saw me and reported me. He thought I was a runaway kid at first, found out that I wasn't, told me I could be thrown in jail on multiple charges, but lets me off. I had to ride in an ambulance though to make sure I was fine, which I was. And to conclude, that's when I officially decided to become a paramedic. What epic fails have you seen from people starting their own business? At a place I used to work, we supplied printing companies with their ink. Being that digital printing is well and truly established at this point, there wasn't a whole lot of business for this kind of ink anymore, so there was a lot of competition between suppliers. One of the technicians somehow weaseled his way to the top despite having no business experience. When he was told very simply just to make more money rather than go out and find new customers, his bright idea was to make our company's ink weaker with the intention that our customers would just have to buy more product to complete their jobs. Surprise! The customers didn't like that and went to the competitors. Business was closed within a year. The CEOs of the parent company in Japan weren't fully aware of everything this guy was doing to run the business into the ground. There was a lot more stupid crap he'd pull. I could probably fill a book with stories from that place. It was not a sound business plan that you could compare to other products and companies, because we were already getting some complaints that some of our colors were weak. This is what gave the guy the idea to make them weaker. He was told by several people it was a stupid idea and that it wouldn't have the desired effect, and that it would just drive our clients away. He was certain, though, that they'd all just accept the crappier product and pay more for it. The Banana Pudding Store. One day, my ex-boyfriend and I were taking a stroll downtown in the city that we were living in at the time. We passed a store that was called the Banana Pudding Store, or some such, I don't really remember exactly. Well, I say, let's go in. I'm sure that they sell more than just banana pudding. You know, like how Home Depot sells more than just hardware. Those guys sell Gatorade and candy bars. We went in and there were vats of banana pudding in the display cases, and I thought, well, surely they must sell other flavors. So I asked if I could have a chocolate pudding, and the guy politely informed me that they didn't have chocolate pudding. So I asked if maybe they had butterscotch or something else. No ma'am, just banana pudding here. I mean, it wasn't false advertising, but surely he couldn't be selling just one single flavor in that whole shop, could he? As expected, the next time we strolled down that street a month or two later, his store was shuttered. I feel bad for him. I'm sure that the guy made great banana pudding that all his friends and family would compliment him on and tell him that he should probably open a banana pudding shop because it was so good, right? But I don't think they literally meant that. Yeah, this sounds like an idea for a business you have when you're 12 and realize of your own accord that it might not be that great of an idea or just never get around to it. Why did nobody stop him? I kind of feel bad for the guy. Maybe try selling your niche product online first there, pal? Oh god, my friend that tried to grow green herb in the woods. It ended up working like a charm. He had so much green herb he could barely pick it all. Filled multiple garbage bags with it. Loaded the bags into his car. Then, well, he didn't research properly and just let it sit. He tried to smoke some of it after it got damp, but as you can guess, it just wasn't burning. A few days later, it was covered in hot mold, and the car smelled like a planet-sized skunk had exploded inside it. My schoolmate at high school wanted to be a club manager. He organized a concert where he invited a kind of famous foreign band to the local club. He paid so much money for them just to arrive and their expenses at the bar. In the end, about 20 people showed up, half of them were his friends. Fortunately, he had a rich dad, so his dad paid for that and life went on. The guy started selling art the next day. No need to say he failed miserably again. In about 2005, my friend's dad tried to start an arcade. In a small town, quite a long walk away from a school using beat-up second-hand machines. To get there from school, you'd have to walk by an established, larger arcade that also sold food. For some context, I live in Las Vegas. When I was in my 20s, I was hired by a man who wanted to build MySpace for exotic dancers. His goal was for the men on the site to pay him to follow their favorite exotic dancers and know what clubs they were dancing at and when. He shut the project down after months of paying me when he found out that no exotic dancers would sign up for it. One of the younger dudes in my karate class was going to start a handyman business. 24 hours, anything needing to be done, anywhere in our district. Sounds good. You gonna get a loan and buy a used truck and get some tools? And you never have talk time on your phone, so you'll get a landline? This is 2006, so that wasn't super outlandish. No, I'll go on my bicycle and I'll just use the tools they have. And they can email me when they need service. Right, because when I have water spraying out of my geyser through the ceiling at 3 a.m., I'm going to email a guy on a bicycle to come and fix it using all the tools and ladder that I don't own. There was a guy in my town that opened a new business that was the equivalent of a brick-and-mortar version of Craigslist or newspaper classified ads. It was a unit in a strip mall with bulletin boards. You paid to put an ad up and other people came to look at the ads with a small picture. This was after Craigslist existed, by the way, not some pre-internet thing. There was no actual merchandise in the store, just crappy pictures of stuff with the contact info. It wasn't even a high-foot traffic location. You had to maneuver through a busy intersection, park, and go inside to look at a bulletin board. It went under, and he tried to blame the landlord because he couldn't get a sign permit for the end of the building, even though he had 2 other signs. When I was in high school, one of my friends wanted to start a little coffee/hot chocolate stand with a cuddle corner and free hugs for anyone who wants them. She offered jobs to our other friends. The idea was that this little business would be operated and staffed by high schoolers. She failed to see the issue with having 16-year-old girls required to give free hugs to customers or having to staff the cuddle corner. Ugh. Hey, you remember that guy who went on Shark Tank to pitch a Bluetooth earpiece that you got surgically implanted in your ear canal that you charged by sticking a needle in your ear while you slept? Brilliant! Somebody thought that it would be a good idea to open a dance club in my northern Canadian city with a dress code. 90% of the population were tradespeople and miners who only own Carhartts and high-vis. Needless to say, it shut down within 6 months. I used to work with small startup businesses, not fancy tech startups. Lots of construction and restaurants. My favorite 2 are the following. The first one was a restaurant/hair salon/childcare center, but non-profit. And there were a lot of people who wanted to do non-profit. It was mostly very community-driven, wanting to give back and help employ people. She had a place picked out and was about to rent and had come to us to ask for money. She named the building, which was tiny and with no kitchen. She was lovely and we encouraged her to open the salon, but maybe without the salon workers cooking for folks in between clients, and without clients caring for kids. Then there was the escort bus. An older gentleman who was certain that this was a good idea. He wanted money to buy a bus, and then he was going to drive it around to find women who wanted to hang out with CEOs and executives. Then during the lunch hour, he was very insistent about the lunch hour part. He'd take it to the downtown business core and park it in front of the large business HQs, and the gentleman who worked there would pay to come party on the bus. But you see, they'd just be paying a fee to hang out on the bus, so it's not like the girls were being paid for doing the deed, so it's totally legal, right? He'd already bought the bus, and it was an old school bus. We didn't fund his endeavor. I'm trying to picture the guy who had this business idea, and all I'm seeing is Danny DeVito's character from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This is a grade A Frank Reynolds idea, right down to the likely broken down and unsanitary school bus. I love it. An old local pub legend, friend of mine, won $400K in British pounds, which is about $500,000 on the lottery. So he decided to buy 2 tanning salons opposite each other, thinking he had an instant monopoly. But the problem came when he started getting them to compete with one another. The managers at each salon began a pricing war, and he was broke in 6 months. The top for me has got to be a client of a design firm that I used to work at. He was a trucker, his wife was a trucker, he wanted to make a sanitary pad that wouldn't need to be changed. Imagine a pad with a little line running down to a micro vacuum strapped to your leg, exhausting into another leg bag. Basically, a pad that sucks the juices into a bag you can chuck in the trash later. Now, I know this sounds a bit like the PureWick, but the challenge this one would have to solve was passing chunky menstrual blood. Ladies, you know what's up, through a tiny tube. If you're wondering how they solved it, they didn't. Also, here's another good one. One client wanted a vape that just blew green herb smoke into the air for the purpose of hotboxing his car. He had money, so hey! One of the engineers designed a little turbine, like a small turbocharger the size of a cherry. Damn if it didn't work way too well. But the high-pitched, screeching noise that turbine made, sheesh. A lady opened a southern soul food buffet in my city. It was incredible. Amazing food. On some days. It was a buffet with a rotating menu depending on the day of the week, and those days were not equal to each other. So what happened was people would go on an off day, be unimpressed, not come back, or come on one of the better days, love it, and come back on an off day, then never come back. I was so disappointed. I'd donate towards reopening that restaurant, but with only the optimal menu every day. That woman has serious culinary talent. We have a small-time theme park in my state called Evermore, and they thought it would be a good idea to try and sue Taylor Swift over her album of the same name. They probably thought it would be a great publicity stunt where they'd get into national papers, and Swift would just give them a couple of grand to go away. In my college town, there was a cereal restaurant. Why make a bowl of cereal at home when you can pay $5 for someone else to do it? Not surprisingly, it closed down soon after opening. There was a bar that opened in my city and their entrance was hidden. They did a news story and they refused to tell the paper where it was actually located. To everyone's complete surprise, they only stayed open for a couple of weeks. The last hidden bar I went to had someone standing outside in the hidden entrance, and if you looked confused enough, they'd walk up to you and go, "You looking for the hidden bar?" and open the door for you. The venue at least had signs and they're listed on the webpage. In my country, there was a guy who used to sell wood. Get your minds out of the gutters. The problem is, he didn't have any of it. Get your minds out. So he'd ask for payment and then not give the product afterwards, hoping that procrastination and time would make the problem go away. He did 4 years in jail. I mean, wood jokes aside, that's just stealing. Yeah, well, he thought he was very smart. In addition, he'd make web lectures on marketing and how to be a successful businessman. He soon became a meme in the whole country. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My father-in-law drove 18 hours down to Florida to catch shrimp, filled his tiny car with tons of the shrimp, and drove back. It took days to seal the shrimp that hadn't gone bad, only to sell a few bags to some friends. The car smelled like seafood for years. In 2011, we had the Norwegian butter crisis in Norway. The shortage caused soaring prices and stores' stocks of butter ran out within minutes of delivery. A pack of butter would sell for between $40 to $200 on the black market. A friend of mine got the idea to drive over to the neighboring country, Sweden, to buy butter and sell it here in Norway. The problem was that you could only carry 100 packets of butter across the Norwegian border. So he made a deal with our local nursing home. He rented a bus and took 20 elderly people on a road trip to Sweden in exchange for receiving the butter quota. The next day, the butter crisis suddenly resolved, and he was left with 2,000 packets of butter he couldn't sell. He still got his basement full of butter. I swear to God, half of these just sound like Always Sunny plots. I really just thought that show was about hilarious East Coast white trash that couldn't survive in real life. Turns out it's a goddamn documentary about self-starters the world over. Thanks for submitting your story on It's Always Sunny in the Nordic Countries. A small family bar and restaurant that I worked for back in high school, which was bought by a local couple. He was a retired insurance company exec of some kind that played golf all day, and she was a stuck-up witch of a woman that had never worked a day in her life and who looked down on all of the restaurant's employees as some kind of uneducated lower life form. The place was located in a small town, and the clientele were mostly local farmers taking their families out in the evenings, factory workers at lunchtime, and on Sunday mornings retired elderly people on fixed incomes who would mob the place after church. The restaurant up to that point was profitable. I'm sure they liked the financials they saw on paper, or they wouldn't have invested in it. However, once they took over, they decided to, quote, improve it. There was one elderly couple in their 90s who'd been coming in every Sunday morning for years who had no teeth. They always ordered the same thing: 2 hot roast beef sandwiches with mashed potatoes and extra gravy, run through a blender, served in a bowl so they could eat it with a spoon. We were now forbidden to do that since the new owner thought it looked gross and didn't fit the image of their fine dining establishment, so the couple stopped coming in as they couldn't eat roast beef any other way. Beer was no longer served in bottles at the tables. If you wanted beer in the bottle, you had to go sit at the bar. At the table, it was poured into a glass before being served. Some people really didn't like that new rule and stopped coming in. There were plenty of other bars in the area to grab a burger at. The first thing the owners did was put an end to overtime pay. The staff consisted of about a dozen older, long-term employees that mostly lived nearby and walked to work because they couldn't afford cars. These people worked their tails off, some of them 7 days a week, for about minimum wage just to be able to afford their rent and groceries. Once they were told that they could no longer work 50 or 60 hours a week to make the maybe $25 a week in overtime, most of them had no choice but to quit and go find some place where they could make enough to survive. Pay them a little more? Heavens no, these are unskilled positions. The new owners found that when they advertised for new employees to fill the vacancies, they didn't get the flood of applicants that they'd expected. Waitresses, for example, were paid $1.70 an hour at the time, and cooks made $4. This was in the 1980s, and the local sewing factories paid more than that to start. So they ended up hiring a bunch of their daughter's high school friends, most of whom were the cheerleader crowd that didn't want anything to do with getting dirty, like scrubbing the floors or restrooms, and none of who could ever work on nights when there was cheerleading practice or a football game or pretty much any Friday or Saturday at all. So the place was chronically short-staffed constantly, orders came out slowly, and the new owner just sat at the bar fuming instead of doing anything to help, occasionally coming back to scream at everyone to stop goofing off and speed things up. Then, when business started to drop off, they decided to remodel to attract new customers. They tore all of the carpeting out of the bar area and replaced it with this ugly yellow vinyl flooring so the working man can come in and feel at home. Like regular people never had carpet in their houses. They added a char-broiler to the kitchen and decided they wanted to add char-broiled haddock to the menu. Have you ever tried to grill haddock? It falls apart in little pieces and looks awful. They decided this was obviously the fault of the 16-year-old kids they hired to make the food. At the same time, they remodeled the bar to make it look homey to the lower classes of people, and then they added expensive scotch and other high-end liquors to sell to the customers, most of whom were draft Budweiser and Miller drinkers. They also, as it turned out, rarely ordered quiche for lunch. The place lasted for about a year and then sat empty for about 10 years before someone new bought it, probably because they were trying to sell it for a huge profit after it was no longer an operating business. A guy I know got a small inheritance, enough for a deposit on a unit or a small house. Nope, seahorse farm. As it turns out, seahorses are very difficult to breed. Someone in Edmonton, Canada opened a dairy store, milk and cheese, and planted it across the street from a large grocery store. He hoped that shoppers would buy everything they needed at the grocery store except their milk and cheese, which the grocery store had an ample supply of, and make another trip to their store for milk and cheese. The place I'm talking about just supplied the same big dairy milk at the same prices and no fancy cheese. It was really only convenient when you only needed a carton of milk and didn't want to deal with a huge parking lot and the hassle of a massive store. So it didn't last. Monthly adult bedroom toy subscription. You'd get a different toy each month, which is an okay idea, I guess. There's one of those for everything nowadays. But the only problem this guy had is that he wanted the customers to eventually return the toy so he could pass it on to the next customer. He actually got into talks with an owner of a local toy shop to help him start, but the enthusiasm flattened out quite quickly. Maybe it's a sign that I should expand my friend network, but the narrator actually feels like he knows more than one person who had used this service. You'd hope that they'd go through a lot of sanitizer in that line of work, though. A loudmouth drunk, supposedly an ex-NFL player from way back, opened a fancy pizza place across the street from the small town's old favorite normal pizza place. It was a pretty obvious attempt to put the old place out of business and corner the lucrative small-town pizza market. The owner of the new place would get hammered and walk around to random tables to schmooze. He'd loudly hit on the ladies in front of their dates. It did have really good pizza, but it was horribly overpriced and the portions were tiny. It went out of business pretty quick. We had a woman in town who started this bookstore/candy store combo. It was just weird and I'm not sure what it was trying to be. It was a bunch of kids' books and then a whole bunch of handmade, weird chocolates and not even stuff that would be appealing to kids. Stuff like green tea chocolate, chili pepper chocolate, super dark chocolate, among others. There were tables to eat the chocolates, but then you couldn't look at the books because your hands would be dirty. The whole thing was just bizarre. Strangely, it did stay open for a year, and in fairness, the lady who owned it truly was a sweetheart. People loved her. She was an older, super kind, super chatty lady. But the business was, well, not sustainable. A guy I know bought $150,000 in fidget spinners at the height of the craze. It took months to ship out from China, and by the time all of his crap had arrived, the mania had ended, and the retail price was already near his original wholesale price. The frickin' guy still has fidget spinners today. I guess he might eventually do okay on it, but my god. A digital camera that looks like a classic Japanese 35mm point-and-shoot. The memory card, which looks like a 35mm film roll and only has space for 36 images, has to be sent away like in the old days to get developed into prints that are mailed back a week later. This is currently on Kickstarter at time of writing. My dad has been in hundreds of pyramid schemes. When I was a kid, he'd always describe how the pyramid worked, and I'd help him with his meetings. It took me a long time to figure out his get-rich plans were really schemes. He still does them. He's never been rich off them, though. One was Excel, a super cancer-beating fruit juice. Then you give me $5,000, then you get 5 people to give you $5,000, then they get their own people to give $5,000. A specialty chocolate shop. It only sold the exact same standard candy bars as any supermarket, but with less range and at 4 times the price. I asked the manager if he had Lindt chocolate balls, an upmarket but well-known product, and he said, "What are those?" Also, there was a supermarket 2 doors down. Someone in my neighborhood opened an artisanal hot dog restaurant called Everyone's Frank about a decade ago. My dad and I went in once at about 6 p.m. on a Saturday. We were the only customers, so the owner, who was working the register, chatted us up. He talked about his plans to expand the business to about 15 locations, which was completely delusional. He also talked about how much he spent on the interior redesign, which was pointlessly fancy. The hot dogs cost $9 and tasted terrible. We never went back and the place was bankrupt within 6 months. My dad always said they'd gone Frankrupt. I have a friend whose family has gotten involved in multiple pyramid schemes, and every single time they get into a new pyramid scheme, they claim it's not a pyramid scheme. No, you don't get it. I am the boss. Once I produce 5 clients for my mentor, then I get to keep all my new clients, and they have to get me 5 new clients each. It's people helping people. What was the biggest disaster of a CV you've ever seen? Unfortunately, the worst I've ever seen was submitted by my friend who I vouched for before he submitted his resume. Now, we were all in the same college classes and mostly all of the same project groups, so his resume should and could have contained all the same stuff my first resume did, plus what he did in the 2 years out of college. I didn't have a whole lot of impressive stuff being just out of college when I applied, but it was well formatted and thought out. My friend submitted a pile of jumbled crap. There were at least 4 different fonts, random missing bullets, no sort of organization, missing important dates and keywords. We did the hiring as a team, but my boss handed me his resume and asked, "Is this your friend? Is this what he's capable of?" To be honest, I was shocked because my friend did well in school and was pretty intelligent. All I could say was, he's better in person and can figure stuff out even if he's never learned it before. I got him the interview and my boss wouldn't put him past the first interview. He said it was a horrible interview and my friend showed no interest and couldn't elaborate on any of the bullet points on his resume whatsoever. It was absolutely shocking and embarrassing for me. I received a resume by email from John. The email address had the name as George listed. The resume was for Max. So 3 different names for 1 application. As if that wasn't bad enough, it was more of a story of his life in paragraph format than citing his skills. That sounds like it was literally 3 kids in a trench coat. Was worked as the boss of the business factory in the job history? I had a guy apply to an online job posting, but all he sent was a picture of his dog and somehow no contact information. This I do get. I've burned at least one e-bridge by attaching the wrong file. Was supposed to send a resume, and instead sent an unfinished board game design. Worse was that I spent the time to write a really good, well-researched cover letter, and then boom, here's how you play The Sims with cardboard. I just didn't follow up out of shame. The narrator was very curious about this author's board game and went down a weird rabbit hole of trying to find a comment where they explained it. And I've got to be frank here, their concept was really cool and novel, even if they eventually gave up. So maybe time to revisit your idea, commenter. I thought it sounded like a neat party game. The hiring manager loves making board games in his free time. Everyone else at work and home thinks it's silly. Finally, he receives your board game design and thinks, finally, the piece that completes my puzzle of loneliness. I don't care what your resume looks like. You're hired, new best friend. And then you never followed up. I do staffing, and you wouldn't believe the resumes I've seen. One time I was trying to fill a third-shift warehouse role for minimum wage, and it was a super urgent need for our client in a remote area. The only guy with experience I could get to bite was very interesting. All his resume said was, I've done warehouse stuff for a long time. I have frick you tatted on my forehead. Please let me get in front of you though. I'm the definition of don't judge a book by the cover. I screened the guy, Skyped with him, and had him come in to meet with me. He was great. I let the client know what to expect before sending him on to the interview. They hired him on the spot. Font size 30 point. Comic Sans and just described her appearance as, I'm looking for a job. One of my worst was the opposite. 10-point font, 3 pages, front and back describing minute technical details of like every job they'd held in the past 20 years. Dude, you may be qualified, but I'll never know because no one's got time to read your novella in the middle of the workday. I had a guy who sent in a resume where he'd accidentally pasted an internet banner ad for adult website to the top of it. Who knows how many of those he sent out? A guy applying for a position in agricultural research just sent a photo of a plant in his backyard. You, sir, do not look like the photo you've submitted. This interview is over. We were hiring for a position in IT recently. One applicant was this lady, about 60, used to work in IT in the 90s and then quit to watch her daughter's children. Most recent job was cashiering in a supermarket. From her CV I learned, when she was 17 she visited the US for a couple of weeks on a student exchange program, where she met David and they fell in love. Afterwards they kept in contact until he eventually came to our country and they got married. They had an exciting life, being roadies for rock bands and such. Somewhere along the line they managed to finish uni and had 2 daughters. David was the love of her life. Then something happened. Unfortunately she didn't elaborate, and David isn't in her life anymore. I never found out whether he died or they got divorced or something. She devoted all of her energy to her daughters and their offspring since that was all she had left of David. Now, after the grandchildren are old enough, she wants to work in IT again. David's name appeared in the application, on the CV and cover letter, a whopping 17 times. Sometimes I wonder what happened to him. I work for one of the largest staffing firms in the United States, so I've probably seen well over 1,000 CVs in my tenure here. I wouldn't say this was a bad CV, more that it was just the funniest one I've ever seen. We receive a lot of applications through typical job boards, such as Indeed or Career Builder, and when they apply, we get sent an email that has their CV attached to it with the job they applied for. We received numerous applications from one person, and when we opened the CV attachment expecting to see their experience, it was actually a 1-page description of how this particular man cheated on his girlfriend multiple times, and this is how she was getting back at him, by screwing him out of the positions he was trying to apply for by replacing his CV with this document. Easily one of the funniest things I've read in my 2 years at this company. We laughed about it for hours. Our office had a submission for a legal assistant, and under skills was, always sleeps with one eye open. I think it was submitted as a joke, I hope it was, but it had an official header info, like the name and contact stuff, but it was blank underneath and said in hand-drawn scrawl, "Me need worky." What bothered me most is that I would have spelled worky differently, i.e. instead of a Y. I'm not sure if it's the worst, but it was the most entertainingly bad. You know in Legally Blonde where Reese Witherspoon gives out her resume and it's on pink scented paper? I got one like that about 9 years ago, which, looking it up on Google just to confirm, made this reference 15 years out of date. Though if it was scented, I did miss that. The resume started off, literally her first paragraph, talking about how Legally Blonde was her favorite movie. It was full of doodles in the margins and specifically requested I do not contact her previous employer because she felt she was fired unfairly and instead listed several sorority sisters as references. She compared herself to Elle Woods several times, explicitly saying that any hiring manager who wouldn't hire her off the resume was doing so because they couldn't handle her individuality. I'm honestly not entirely sure if this was a legit resume or some kind of joke. It had almost nothing to do with the job listing. My manager joked that BuzzFeed was going to write about me if I didn't call. The job went unfilled. We chose literally no one over this. It wasn't really bad, but he did have a section that stood out. Health. In good health. I was hiring EMTs for a health screening, so I can kind of understand it, but just weird. I received one which just said, I have no skills because I've never worked, but I have my GED, nothing else. On a different resume I received, the candidate listed his height. He was 5'5". I don't know why he thought that would be relevant. I know, right? It's not even like he's impressively short or anything. At least if you're under 5 feet, you can change the wording of that to some CV bullcrap like, well-suited to seeing things from a different perspective, or proficient in low-level tasks relating to short supply inventory. I'm sorry, I'll stop now. I'm not even making this up. I was doing the hiring for a company, and a guy put on a line of his qualities that he was smarter than the average bear. For those of you who don't know, this was a favorite line from the main character in the cartoon Yogi Bear. I mean, you did hire him, right? Were they applying to be a park ranger? It was the worst I've ever seen, but also my favorite. My company does business with a certain family-friendly theme park. This means our employees can't have visible tattoos or crazy hair colors, and they need to be able to pass a substance test, a background check, among other things. I received a resume for a sales position from a guy that we'll just call Andrew. I've just pulled it up so I can quote it word for word. The cover letter says, "Hey, what's good? I've worked at almost every fast food place around, but now it's time to try something new. I don't know how to do retail, but I'll learn. I don't have any official sales experience of the legal kind, you know what I mean, but that was a few weeks ago, and I'm not like that no more." On his resume, he listed the places he'd worked at and had descriptions such as, I take people's orders and clean up their messes, and take people's orders money and give them their crap. I thought the resume was submitted as a joke until I looked Andrew up on Facebook, he had an uncommon last name, and I found his profile. It was mostly a bunch of bullet points about why he didn't like cheese. His last interview was at a cheese factory. I suspect he was fired from there and didn't want to say why, so he kind of overplayed the not liking cheese thing as the reason for leaving. It was still a very weird thing to be on a CV though. I got one with a first name only, no address, no email, and no phone number. Even if I wanted to hire him, there was no way to get a hold of him. I just had a pretty entertaining one. Picture of the person applying, what I think was supposed to be the local time, and plenty of bullet points. Each bullet was highlighted in blue or green, then at the end of many of them it just said, neglected. All of these skills are neglected? What the frick? It had a horrible font, was brightly colored, and had a cutesy paw print on the front. You missed out on hiring a golden retriever, classic rookie mistake. Just yesterday, I was interviewing a girl that had SQL curiosity in her CV. So it's the middle of the interview and I randomly ask her if she's confident with SQL, to which she responds, "Well, I personally don't know how it works, but my boyfriend is a programmer and is very good at it." No, we didn't hire her boyfriend. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mother-in-law got one for her accounting office that was a bog-standard CV for a low-ranking accounting position, and attached to it was a huge glossy photo of the applicant on the beach, sprawled on the sand at sunset, with a focus on her ample assets. My old boss kept a file of CVs he thought were terrible and pulled them out here and there for a laugh. This is an English second language school, so there were a few from non-native English speakers with really obvious spelling mistakes that should have been caught by any spell check program.
Then there was the guy who attached like 10 passport photos of himself to the file. Like, why? 1, maybe, but 10? Why so many? You could just feel the ego dripping out of every sentence in the whole thing as well. I helped my old boss scan through CVs a while back. A student applying for a job as a barista, their opening line, "I don't believe coffee is a drink. I believe it's an experience, and you need me to be the face of that journey." They had a little waffle about how coffee changed their lives and molded him as a person, how coffee had been his savior in university. The kid seemed to be really into coffee, it was well written, but we were a coffee shop in a shopping center. We didn't need his prose. He was an English student and the CV read as if it was a piece of coursework. The whole thing was in Comic Sans and the only experience he had down was coffee drinker for 19 years. The kid was 19. He didn't get the job, but I'm sure he graduated well with how well the opening letter was written. I needed someone to work at a gas station. Guy applied and his resume said he was the assistant manager everywhere he'd worked previously, except he abbreviated both words without punctuation. That's right, he was a 5-time ass man looking to pump your tank. I worked in a cafe, and the guy whose job was to wash dishes showed me his CV for an upcoming job interview. It specified that he can cut mahon cheese very good thin slice. The job was for security. I got a resume from an actual working girl once. She included it on her resume along with the name of the company and website you could go to book her services. Listed under her job description was, "Assessing and meeting clients' needs and desires." I mean, I'm willing to bet that this is far from the worst pick you could have gone with. She even did a good job of the bullcrap rewriting of her skills that so many of us struggle to do. I'm going to say that your average escort is also far more personable and easy to talk to than a lot of the weirdos in your average office. Not that I have any experience in the matter. Not unusual or sadly unique, but when I was working at a pub, I was good mates with the manager, and would often have a scan through of CVs that had been dropped in by the young people looking for a job after they left school. Most of these kids were like 16 or 17 at most, but had CVs that ran 3 to 4 pages. Even someone in their 40s going for a high-flying management job at a world-leading financial company on a few £1,000,000 a year should only have 1 or 2 pages max. These kids had done nothing aside from GCSE and maybe a paper round bit, a bit of volunteering at the most. And that's perfectly fine and reasonable when you're 16 and straight out of school. What in the heck did they get taught in school? To fill out as much crap as possible to make it look good? Why aren't schools teaching them that writing about how much they enjoy going to the cinema or gardening with their dad, that was a genuine inclusion by the way, isn't the kind of thing that's going to get them a job? It was waiting on work at a country pub. Putting nothing except, "I have all my limbs and the normal number of chromosomes," would have overqualified them. Not an employer, but I looked over CVs to create a shortlist for a job. The worst was one that was half complete. It got halfway through and then had a line that said, "To be completed later," followed by a blank page. The other one, not a CV, but a cover letter about why they wanted the job, said what they could do, but it completely missed the point of the job and job description. We were defending claims, and this letter went on about helping claimants, doing the claimants justice. Both got rejected as the job involved attention to detail and research. Neither had proven that they could do this. Several years ago, I had the misfortune of interviewing a fellow for a role in a film shoot. Although the production technically had a human resources professional in charge of screening resumes, they were far better versed in the recruiting process than they were in what qualifications were necessary for the job. As a result, less than half an hour before I was supposed to meet with the man in question, I was handed a document that would have made the most pathological liars blush. According to the resume, my interviewee had been an uncredited consultant on over 100 feature films. While there certainly are cases in which a given worker goes uncredited, it has even happened to me, the sheer magnitude of the fellow's claims went well beyond the realm of believability. Furthermore, the guy had listed quite a few alleged skills that seemed to suggest a less than complete knowledge of the industry. My favorite claim was that he had expert-level apple box skills. For the record, an apple box is literally a wooden box, that's it. There's a few different sizes and they're used whenever something like a plant or a small piece of furniture or Tom Cruise needs to be stacked on top of a box. I went ahead with the interview anyway, if only because I was curious about how the guy would back up his various claims. He turned out to be maybe 20 years old, which was far too young to have worked on that many of the films, and when pressed, he explained that he had consulted on each of them by writing letters to the people involved in the productions, in which he outlined several suggestions on various things. Suffice to say, he didn't get the job, although I'm certain that he listed himself as an uncredited consultant on R1 simply because he attended the interview. In short, lights, camera, exaggeration. This one guy, he had a period of about 4 years where he listed his job as stay-at-home dad, under which he wrote, learned conflict resolution techniques. We were hiring for flight dispatchers at my previous company. Came across a guy's resume where it says that he was a train operator/engineer. We were intrigued as to why such a qualified person would go for a flight dispatcher position until we read the second page, which had the actual job description. He was the conductor of the train inside the local mall for kids. I mean, kudos for the wordplay, but don't waste my time. A guy's resume read like a story told in the third person. James has been interested in IT since he took his first computer class at blank junior high. He always excelled at typing, getting high marks in word processing course at blank high school. Since then, he has moved on to deeper knowledge with computers, computer systems, spelt wrong, and what makes them tick. James built his first computer in his bedroom from parts he scavenged from Skid Row in 1996. He gained a great amount of still learning how components fit together and how hardware and software join together to make synergies. He took his love of computers and worked at blank PC repair in the summer of 2001, building, repairing, and reinstalling hardware, software, and operating systems, bracket OSs. And on for several more paragraphs, typos and run-on sentences included. I had 2 girls, roughly 19 to 23, come in and apply for a job. Both at the same time gave me their resumes, and the only change on them was the name. Otherwise, they were identical. They were also crap resumes because they had no previous job experiences, and the only thing listing were high school poetry awards. Also printed in color with a light blue background and a flowery border. Not a CV, but a phone interview for a simple laborer's job. I asked the guy one simple question pertaining to the requirement of the job. Are you physically capable of digging, raking, and pushing a wheelbarrow full of soil? The man said yes, and the next morning he showed up at the job site and was a cripple, could barely walk at all. My dad owns a vacuum repair business. One bloke sent a CV in, he misspelled vacuum. Sure, that's not a big deal, vacuum's a weird word to spell. The rest of his CV was rife with spelling and punctuation errors, but it's an engineering job, so it's not that much of a concern. If he can fix a vacuum, who gives a damn if he knows the difference between THEIR and THERE? The main problem was that he wrote the CV all in caps and had no previous engineering experience. Not even theoretical. He had had no education in it. Managed an electronics retail store, so not too many resumes, but lots of terrible applications nonetheless. Had someone list being tall and swimming as skills. Recently had someone who did attach a resume in which he put both his references and experiences as available upon request, and listed his nationality, birth date, parents' names, and marital status below a selfie. I mean, to be fair, tall is one of those skills you just can't teach these days. A guy calling himself Darth Ice sent in his resume in Star Wars theme with a black background, yellow font, and all the shebangs. I've discarded many resumes based on the presence of emojis. One that just had babysitting experience, a first name, and her objective was a Star Trek quote. She was 25. I worked in higher education, and my last role included being responsible for tracking all the applications of interest, which was a year-round, open application for adjuncts who might be available to teach last minute. This one guy kept popping up over and over again when I would update my spreadsheet for the hiring committee. He went to a lot of trouble to create a new username for each submission, because since it was always open, you can't reapply for the same position. The dude's CV was just one page, and I could never figure out why he was submitting it to me. There was nothing about teaching or education in the document, and he didn't include any people as references in the system. He would just type "not applicable" in the boxes or "see resume." The single page was just his name in a really large font at the top. Everything was centered on the page too, followed by his place and date of birth, his wife's name and when they got married, and the names and birth dates of his children, including his stepson. A long list of hobbies and interests, like reading John Grisham, fishing, vacations with the family, and TV shows, and that was it. I don't know if he thought an expression of interest was like expressing his interests, and I always wondered why he dedicated so much time to apply for a job I wasn't sure he understood.
When did an idiot say something cringe or incriminating into his microphone mid-game? A group of 5 of us had been doing several runs in World of Warcraft and had been chatting it up the whole time about whatever. One woman's boyfriend came into her room and asked her if, when she was done, if she could take a look under his nether regions. He had a bump on his bag and didn't know if it was a pimple or a boil. He was talking about how much it hurt and itched, and he tried using a mirror but couldn't get the angle right. She let him go on for about 2 to 3 minutes as we were all busting up laughing before she finally told him her mic was on. Oh my god, this happened to me. My press to talk button was stuck, and I'd gotten up to feed the cat. I'd always sing songs for him as I'm feeding him, and apparently my mic picked up everything. So when I got back, my entire raid was singing about my cat, and I was as embarrassed as all heck. I don't sing in public, like, at all. I find it so embarrassing. A kid on PC arguing with his mum because he didn't want dinner. I was so hungry, and his mum sounded sweet. This was like last month on Call of Duty Modern Warfare. The guy was on the phone with his bank accountant, probably, or at least I hope, and he was saying his credit card info, social security, and a bunch of private info. Hopefully he's still safe. Older sister was telling his little brother, our teammate, that it's her time to play and she'll turn off the console if he doesn't get up. He insisted, "Just this one match, please! No! No!" and disconnected. Lol. So basically, me and 3 other guys on Discord. One was living with his parents and grandparents. His grandpa barges into his room and after mumbling something he yelled, "Pull down your pants!" The guy was just wearing some dirty pants, but we fully misunderstood the situation. Or you didn't misunderstand the conversation and you just way too readily accepted your friend's explanation? Nah, I'm kidding. It was probably just one of those spontaneous colonoscopist visits like that guy who burst into my house the other day. Weird that I never got the results for that exam. Here we go. I have a story for this one. So me and my friend, let's call him Ben, had a goal a while back to complete every achievement in Minecraft on the X-Bone. We put nearly 300 hours into the world, and whenever we'd play, his girlfriend would always go on her phone to help pass the time. This one particular evening, we were building my house, well, more of a tower, and he starts placing random blocks in places where they aren't supposed to be. I asked if he was okay, and he said that he was fine and carried on building. As time went on, his breathing got progressively heavier, until about 5 minutes later I asked if his girl was going south of the border on him. What I didn't know is that he was in fact getting a down-under kiss, and he was getting close to arriving, until his girlfriend heard me over the mic and started laughing and ruined the moment. I'm sorry, Ben, but I think that's a lesson learned not to multitask. Obviously, Minecraft is more important. Not bad, but memorable. I got to my buddy's house and he was playing Call of Duty. He has his headset on. This house is a work in progress, so every time I get there, something's changed. I walk into his gaming room and see that he's made some modifications to the house and I ask him about them. He proceeds to give me a lesson on construction fundamentals and building technique and the why and why not. After about 5 or so minutes, he realizes that he was mic'd the whole time and he goes, "Oh crap," and someone chimes in, "Hey, so that was actually really interesting and all, but can you guys shut the frick up?" I don't think we've ever laughed as hard as that. I don't have any as weird as the ones here, but I definitely recall one time getting ready to pull a raid boss in World of Warcraft and hearing one kid's mother yell at him to take out the trash. The kid was 16 or something, and all 24 of us were like, "Nope, not pulling yet, go take out the trash for your mum." I also have a friend who used to fall asleep on Discord after taking Ambien, and some of those conversations were hilarious, but I'm pretty sure he knows where I live and will unalive me if I share them here. I caught my friend tickling his pickle on mic thinking that he'd muted himself. I heard him groaning and then I shouted, "No climaxes in my party." My boyfriend never has his mic on, but one of the rare times he was talking to his friend, his dad came around the corner to feed his sister's bunnies, his sister being away at college, and sang the song he always sings at the top of his lungs when he goes to feed them. Bunny, 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 bunnies! In falsetto. Years ago, Halo 3. My cat was being unusually affectionate and cuddly. I fragged a guy in multiplayer and was distracted by the cat. I start asking, "Who has a fuzzy belly? Who's my fuzzy girl?" And it turned out the guy I killed could still hear my voice and he was having none of it. I wish I still had the Xbox Live message he sent. He seemed really insecure about his fuzzy belly. I was playing Rainbow Six Vegas a whole while back, got myself a few friends in, and also had a couple of stragglers. We were pretty decent as a team, we'd not lost for a few days, although playtime had only been a few hours due to work. Anyway, these stragglers who joined got added to our chat. I talked strategy with them and they seemed alright, 2 brothers from Georgia. We start playing and we're abseiling down the roof, running through casinos and everything is going well. Our squad are racking up kills, but one of the stragglers keeps dying. His brother is complaining. The guy who keeps dying grabs the briefcase and runs. We're calling to get him to come to the lift shafts, but he ignored us, runs straight to the windows and gets taken out. Drops the case in a room packed full of enemies. We can't get it in time, we lose. The useful brother starts complaining and muttering under his breath, then talks loudly, like we couldn't hear him before, and says sorry for his brother's mistake. We'll win now. We switch to defense. The useless brother runs straight out of the vault despite telling him to wait at the back stairs, goes and gets killed again. His brother is mumbling again, clearly agitated. Now the useful brother is defending the case. Anyone who gets past the 3 main defense points, he's picking them off and just doing great. The case never leaves our sight, and this is all despite the back stairs not being covered. Useless brother sees someone else in the case room, decides to throw a flashbang. We all get blinded. Look around and the case is gone. As we're going chasing after it, the useless brother apologizes. His brother says, "Whatever," and in his mumble voice, he seemingly thinks that no one can hear him say, "This kind of crap is why I went number 2 in your gym bag." The character of the useless bro stops dead in front of me as we're chasing the enemy. Then there's a loud noise from the other bro's mic, followed by what sounded like the biggest slap, open palm strike that I've ever heard. Useful bro's character suddenly stops too. Me and my squad are laughing, wondering what's going on, as we lose the game, and on the mics we can just hear one of the bros crying. And then a Georgian mum shouting in the distance. It wasn't really a "this dude forgot to turn off his mic" moment, but rather he was trying to play it off as if it was. I was playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare when one of my teammates, Jason, died, and was left to spectate me. After a while he said he had to leave and then proceeded to moan loudly. At first I thought he was just cranking it until he leaned into the mic and in the worst girl voice you can imagine said, "Man, I can't believe Jason has a 7-inch eggplant." I just laughed uncontrollably and he responded with, I'm sorry man, I was getting busy." I mean, if you're gonna lie, why stop at 7 inches? Well, one time my husband and I started getting frisky after he was killed in a match. Got a text from his brother who he was playing with like 10 minutes later telling us to turn off his mic. Back in the Halo 2 days, a teen was getting yelled at to get off the game. He called his mum the B-word and she responded with a butt-whooping that sounded like a hyena getting mauled by 50 cats in a plywood box. This teen's kid brother actually got on during the beatdown saying, "Oh, hell yeah, he never lets me play." The little man was actually pretty good fun from what I remember too. Chillin' in squad when someone doesn't have push to talk on and they start yelling at their family and occasionally letting out a giant scream from dying. Yeah, sorry about that, I have push to talk now and I no longer live with my family. Now my only problem is that I suck at any and all games and my neighbors still complain about my screaming when I die. Was playing on a CSGO server, this squeaker comes in the server acting all tough, trash-talking, mocking other people. Now, it's about 11 at night right now and we hear this kid saying, "But mommy, I don't want to go to sleep, I want to play." We all start laughing our butts off and he disconnected. Years ago, I was playing Gears of War on Xbox Live and this kid joined my game. From the sound of his voice, he couldn't have been older than 12 or 13, but he was talking trash the whole time. You know, the usual stuff. "You suck, you're gay, fudge your mom," etc. Apparently his mum walked in while he was in the middle of throwing yet another one of his dumb insults at me and his mic was on. She came in and was like, "What? What are you saying? Is that how I raised you?" There was a slapping sound. Huh? You gonna talk like that again? Answer me, did I raise you like that? More slaps. And he's crying and saying, "Mama, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Mama, please, let me finish my game." And she's like, "Aw, hell no. You're not finished nothing." And then he's dropped out of the game. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It's not necessarily him forgetting to turn his mic off, but him not being able to. It's been several years and it could just have been a hoax, but it certainly shook me up. I believe it was around the time of Halo 3. I'd been on Xbox Live, fooling around in Map Maker with some buddies. One of them had been dealing with a rough home life and often talked about his fear that his parents were into some trouble with other people. Being kids, me and the other guy brushed it aside as just nonsense. But one day we were playing and we hear a loud bang from his mic. He was yelling at his mum and then there were multiple loud bangs in quick succession, almost like someone had been firing a piece on full auto. We hadn't heard him over the sounds, but when they stopped, his tone of voice changed, and it sounded more like a sobbing, yelling for his mum. My buddy and I were shook now, trying to find out what the frick happened. We could just hear sobbing and he wasn't returning to the game, and after about 10 or 15 minutes of no contact from him, he just disconnected and we'd never heard from him since. Just today I was playing Modern Warfare and this guy on my team had his mic open. His phone rang in the background and he picked up to his wife talking about how he needs to get off his butt and go to the store. He led with profanities and ended up with, "Fine, witch," and went back to just playing. I said into the game chat, "So, are you gonna go to the store?" Unfazed, he said, "Nah." Some guy confessing his love to a girl and then singing a song to her. It worked in the end. We all cheered for him. Basically, my friend. He always keeps his mic on, and this one time I heard his parents arguing in the background, and he literally screamed, "Yay, 2 Christmases!" And then there was silence. Oh god, I was that guy once. Nothing scandalous, just embarrassing. You know how sometimes couples will be all sugary sweet lovey-dovey to each other when they're alone, in a way that they'd probably not do in front of other people because it's so cringy? Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about, people in relationships. Anyway, I had my headset on and I was being a typical idiot with my friends. My then partner was nearby, so I took off the headset, forgot to mute the mic, and commenced the instant transformation into this over-the-top cutesy love kitten. You can imagine how much I wanted to crawl under a rock and die a few minutes later. That was like 12 years ago. I've been extra careful about the mic from then on. I was playing World of Warcraft with a friend and he was teaching me the basics. My mum comes into my room and yells in the heaviest smoker accent possible, "What up, lads?" What she said next was interrupted because I ripped out my microphone. My friend was frightened for a good minute, thinking someone had broken into my house. Someone with an open mic instructing his girlfriend to give him a down-under kiss. I was playing a game after a few beers once and I was that dude. Me and the ex were talking crap around the house. We were weird, we'd broken up after she grew up and I didn't. Like, it was really weird. We'd make weird noises around the house in some sort of ritual. Seagull noises, cat noises, poor imitations of weapons going off. And here's what my group would have heard. First her making a cat noise, she had a really realistic meow. Then me, gotta go help my partner with something. Followed by me trying and failing for some reason to drop group. Then her meowing, getting more insistent. Then me going Then her abruptly turning the meow into a gurgle, then a perfectly normal conversation about food, except for a couple of weird words thrown in. Then I heard snickering coming from my PC. He started reading out loud to himself a particularly racy, furry anime novel featuring many, many tentacles. A friend of ours had a full-on seizure while we were in voice chat. We just hung around for about half an hour listening to him breathing and making sure he's okay, and after he recovered and spoke to us a few days later, we got info of family near him to call if it happens again. That stuff is super scary because we all knew he was having one, but we couldn't do anything and don't even know if we're listening to him die or not. It was a video call on Zoom, but one guy literally turned his camera on, picked his nose, ate it, and then turned his camera back off. Repeatedly. He turned his camera on and off repeatedly too, and he completely looked like it was just some subconscious thing. Do you think he missed a click at some point and thought he was actually turning it off to do that? Or was this the ultimate power play? Like he was staring at the camera the whole time while this happened? I usually play Sea of Thieves in the morning, and since my friends don't have the game, I pick up players from Xbox Live posts. Keep in mind I live in Greece and our time zone is semi-opposite with America's. In other words, my morning is a very late night to my teammates. This results in meetings with many interesting people such as substance addicts, and even a substance dealer once. Or drunk people. I don't even know, whatever. But my personal award would go to the guy who was pretty chill when playing and was sounding like he was fairly close to my age. I'm 18. He was actually a pretty cool guy and we had fun for a couple of hours. Then at some point we heard a younger girl's voice saying that the baby has waken up again in a sleepy voice. The dude apologized and said he'd be right back. Then he proceeded to sing to the baby until the baby slept, which I found rather cute, and plus there was nothing going on in-game since we were in the middle of our journey, so the rest of the crew didn't mind either. And as a side note, the guy had a nice voice. Anyway, when he came back, we were about to tease him, but the first thing he said was, "Sorry, I had to put my son to sleep." Which raised some questions because the guy sounded serious, and we all stood in silence because, like I said, he sounded fairly young. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't ask too many questions because I respect someone's private life, but the guy was very open about it to me, so me and another crewmate were intrigued. Turns out he was 17 and his girl, the voice from before, was 16. They had a protection incident and ended up with their 4-month-old son, but they were very happy about it. Some moments passed and crewmate number 4 was fairly quiet this whole time, and his character wasn't moving. We asked if everything was okay and we got no response. But after a while we heard some snorting coming from crewmate number 4's mic. We couldn't stop laughing, and the next day crewmate number 4 admitted that the song made him go to sleep despite his best efforts. He had a wireless headset and proceeded to go number 2. Then he went, "I'm back." Clearly didn't mute his mic like he thought he had. I wasn't playing or watching the live stream, but during an iRacing event, NASCAR driver Kyle Larson didn't realize his mic was on for the entire group and therefore was being broadcasted via Twitch. And he said, "Can anybody hear me? Hey, N-word." The very next day, he lost his real-life NASCAR sponsors and his real-life ride. He was part of the drive for a diversity program, a program dedicated to attracting minorities and women to NASCAR. Bro, imagine losing your career on iRacing. Okay, so this one was actually on me. I first got Call of Duty 3 from PS4 a while back. I was a serious squeaker, so eventually I joined my first online match and was getting whooped. I kid you not, my mum was making tater tots that night and proceeded to yell, loud enough for my dinky little earbud mic to pick up. "Owen, your tater tots are ready!" Not my proudest moment, but I still laugh at it. I was in a raid and one of the healers speaks up in the middle of a fight and says, "Oh crap, I've got to go." The guild leader was understandably all, "What? Why?" And my dude just responded, "Tornado." He forgot to turn his mic off, so he heard the sounds of wind and the building shaking in the background until the sound of wood cracking and the audio just went absolutely insane. The guild leader had to mute him at that point. He turned out to be okay, but we didn't find that out for a week or two after the event. Years ago, World of Warcraft was still only vanilla and raids needed 40 people. Our guild was quite tight with each other, even with about 60 people in it. So the jokes could get personal, but still have heart. One time we went raiding, and in the middle of it a guy asks for a quick break. Less than 5 minutes, he said. Raid leader said, "Okay, let's have a short break then for everyone." Well, everyone went to the loo and grabbed a drink and refilled the side snacks, all done within 5 minutes. Except that guy. He still had his mic on too, so suddenly someone hears something and tells us to be quiet. 39 people on TeamSpeak, we went silent and started to listen to the guy doing the deed with his girlfriend. All from start to end. And every one of us in silence with the occasional giggle on certain moments. During the deed, they said the most cliché things to each other, things like how bad of a girl she is, deserving of his rooster, how she wants him to go faster, deeper, and so on, plus the occasional butt slap, of course. After about 15 minutes, he came back and we all tried to be normal. So did he. Our raid leader said that he was late, but he apologized, saying that his mother had called. We all laughed, and he was at first confused, but understood what had happened. He was very ashamed, and we had a good laugh. The extra part in this, we had a couple of minors in the raid, and some of them came to me in the days after to talk about it. I was the oldest female in the guild, and some of them called me the guild mother. They were confused about the cliches and name-calling during the deed, so I had a lot of explaining to do. I was raiding Blackrock Foundry in World of Warcraft. We pull a boss, and one of our hunters is standing there doing nothing. She dies, and her mic comes on. All we hear is super loud moaning and gasping. She's quickly removed from the server, and we down the boss. About 10 minutes later, she rejoins the server and goes, "Sorry, my boyfriend decided to frick me right before we pulled." Our guildmaster kicked her on the spot. Apparently, this was not the first time it had happened. Wolf Kitty, if you're still out there, thank you for this story. Lawyers. What was your facepalm moment in court? I was representing a plaintiff in a hit-and-run case. Plaintiff is testifying and is, despite me preparing them for several hours the previous day, an absolutely terrible witness for her own case. Like she couldn't even identify the street she was crossing when she was hit by the car. It was a major highway, and we'd gone through the sequence of events countless times the day before the hearing. The "oh crap" moment came during cross-examination. Defense counsel pulls out a picture of my client dressed up and ready to hit the club, which was posted to Facebook the day after the alleged incident. I, thinking quickly, object because the timestamp refers to when it was posted, not when it was taken. Defense counsel shows the picture to my client and asks her when the picture was taken. Sure enough, they say it was taken the day after the accident when she was supposedly in unbearable pain. Oh crap. Just as well, they didn't deserve to get anything. When I was in college, I was a bailiff. Guy is on trial for murder. First witness testified that she saw the defendant shoot the victim. Second witness states the same. Police officer testimony is that he arrived at the scene and defendant was there holding the piece. Coroner testimony is that the first bullet hit the victim in the arm, the second one hit the victim in the torso, and the third one hit the victim in the heart, which was the fatal shot. The defendant yells out, "See, that proves I didn't do it. I only shot the motherfudger twice." Sat in on a personal injury case where the plaintiff broke their leg in an accident and had a doctor on the stand as an expert. The woman's lawyer begins questioning the doctor about their experience with leg injuries. He was a well-known orthopedic surgeon in the area. She asks if he's ever treated a tibular fracture. The leg bones are tibia and fibula, by the way, to which the doctor only answers, "No, I've never treated a tibula." Then she starts grilling him with questions about the tibula. About 6 to 7 questions afterwards, she asks, "How did you get a medical license and have been able to practice medicine this long if you've never treated a tibular fracture?" And begins a small rant about going after his credentials and those that gave it to him, to which he simply responds, "There is no bone named the tibula." The lawyer became beetroot red, and everyone in the court tried their best to keep from laughing, including the judge. If you're grilling a well-known expert in a particular field and you're getting quizzical looks from them, it can sometimes be worth wondering why you, a person who knows nothing about the subject matter, seem to be winning the discussion. It could be a trap, or maybe, like this lawyer, you're asking questions about made-up bones. Check yourself before you legally wreck yourself. I was a baby lawyer in my first year representing the 19-year-old child of some rich people in San Mateo County, California. My client had gone on a bit of a shoplifting spree, and we were cleaning all her cases up with a global plea, meaning we handled them all at once. Being new, I filled out the plea form wrong, swapping the counts she was charged with for the counts she was pleading to. It's an easy mistake to make. Every court has their own unique form, and I was unfamiliar with San Mateo's. The judge calls my line, starts reading off the plea form, notices the mistake, and then starts screaming at the top of his lungs, "Counsel, what is this? What is this? Is this your first day on the job? This is a court of law and we do not accept mistakes. Fill this plea form out correctly or I'll have you taken into custody for contempt." I did not expect a reaction like that. My client, who'd clearly just taken a huge rip of illegal substances at 8 a.m. and who was wearing an all-pink velvet tracksuit, was looking at me like I was the biggest idiot in the world. I corrected the plea form. The judge made me wait until the very end of the calendar to take my plea. Afterward, he called me up to the bench. In private, he told me, "I'm sorry to ream you like that. Everyone messes the plea form up, so I always pick the youngest lawyer to yell at."
The older guys will grumble and complain, but if you noticed, they all fixed their forms, and we didn't have any more problems. It keeps the calendar running smooth. Where did you go to law school? After that, he invited me into his office for coffee and gave me some really good life and work advice. Turns out he likes talking to new lawyers. In short, a judge loses his crap in court over a simple mistake. Turns out it was all a show for the other lawyers, and I have one of the worst and best court experiences of my early career. Represented a woman charged with multiple very serious felonies in the state of Virginia. She insisted that in the months before the offense, she had been seriously dating one of the detectives who ultimately wound up investigating and testifying in her case. For a variety of reasons, I trusted this client and believed her, even though the detective never disclosed the relationship in his report. So during his testimony, I ask, "Detective Smith, you had a romantic relationship with Miss Defendant, correct?" He goes, "What? No," and is visibly offended. The judge looks at me like I've lost my mind. The Commonwealth attorney audibly says, "What?" I'm freaking out because a large part of my cross and argument was focused on the bias formed by the prior relationship, and now I've got nothing and I've lost all credibility. I try again. "Detective Smith, have you had relations with Miss Defendant?" As the Commonwealth rises to object and the judge starts to scold me, the detective goes, "Oh yeah, we did it. It just wasn't very, romantic." The judge acquitted my client of the relatively minor charge that the detective in my story was involved with, but convicted of the other, much more serious charges that detective had nothing to do with. There was a confession and video on the serious charges, so it was kind of a no-brainer. Sorry, I'm being intentionally vague, but there are no confidentiality concerns, since this all happened in open court. But it's just distasteful to give out too much information about a client. The detective was not disqualified, his testimony was not thrown out. Impeachment, no matter how good, doesn't result in you getting to throw out a witness's testimony entirely. By the way, it wasn't really the doing of the deed that was the issue, it was that he didn't disclose it to anyone, and his repeated insistence under questioning that he didn't disclose it because it was irrelevant. Like Watergate, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up that gets you. But I don't get to demand the judge throw out the testimony or that charge just because the cop failed to disclose a prior relationship with the defendant. I just get to point it out, argue it in closing, and then hope the jury also sees the relevance. In the UK, and bear with me on this one, I was in court listening to the most boring old defense lawyer you've ever seen. He was questioning the arresting officer in the case. It was substances or something like that. Anyway, he's droning on about every little detail, and the magistrate was constantly telling him to hurry along. The arresting officer was getting noticeably annoyed, and the room became pretty empty pretty quickly. Everyone was very bored and annoyed. He was droning about details that I'm not sure anyone was really listening to or cared about. Anyway, he went over arrest times and the likes with the officer, time he admitted the suspect and released him. He had bored the officer to the point where the guy was barely paying attention. So he was admitted in at 21:45 on the night in question. Yep. And released the night after. Yep. And what time was that exactly? Just after 10 p.m.? Yep, that's about right. What time after 10 p.m.? I don't know, 10:15 maybe. So my client was detained for more than 24 hours. Correct? What? The penny dropped. The officer had let his guard down and had revealed that he had kept the defendant for more than 24 hours, which is the max time for detention in the UK. The defense rested, and the magistrate threw out the case immediately. Well played, sir. Well played. There you go, boring people of the internet. If you feel depressed that your friends fall asleep in the middle of your stories, and that the light seems to leave their eyes when you open your mouth, just get a job as a lawyer. You can be a superstar when you drone the opposing party into submission. Got called for jury duty. I was at the jury selection phase and they asked if anyone here thinks they should not, blah blah. Defendant was in the room. I raised my hand. The defending lawyer looked at me like, "Oh, this ought to be good," and asked me to explain. I suggested I tell them in private. He insisted I tell the courtroom. I said, "Okay, I probably shouldn't be on this jury because I was on a previous jury for this man, which returned a guilty verdict." The lawyer's face went, "Oh crap." Commotion and a wait while they looked up records. Yep, verified. The whole jury was now tainted. Everyone goes home and they start over. I was interning for a judge. We were in the middle of voir dire for what was frankly not that exciting of a criminal case. Half-day trial expected, not salacious details or violence or anything. 75 potential jurors in the room, and when my judge didn't let a guy out of jury duty because he'd have to pick up his kids, that guy proceeded to say in front of everyone that if he's made to show up next week, he'd make it the shortest trial ever and find him guilty right out the gate. My judge was an incredibly even-keeled guy, nothing shook him or got a rise out of him, and he was an expert at figuring out what he wanted to say in the most neutral fashion possible before he said it. Conversations with him took forever because there was a pause before every sentence. But then, this guy had just poisoned an entire jury pool of 75 people. We had to individually question each person to see if that little outburst was going to affect their impartiality. 75 in-camera interviews later, the judge pulls the guy back in front of everyone and begins to scream at him about disrespecting him, the courts, and every other juror's time. Me, the attorneys, and the court reporter go white-faced because we didn't know this was coming. The guy didn't have to sit for jury duty, but I still don't know if he got to pick his kids up since he spent a couple of days in jail for contempt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was involved in a pretty messy custody case. The other party was playing a lot of stupid games and kept requesting continuances. I requested a substance test, which the judge ordered. However, the defendant didn't submit it. To clarify, he did show up, he just stood in front of the loo for literally 2 hours and claimed he couldn't go number 1. I was representing the plaintiff, so the burden was on me. I called multiple witnesses that testified to the defendant's substance use. So the opposing counsel decides to call their client for direct examination and asks, "You don't use smack, right?" That is, for the non-lawyers, a very stupid question for many reasons, especially considering his client didn't show up for his substance test. However, I fully expected the defendants to just lie and say he was clean. After the question was asked, there was a really long pause and the defendant said, Yeah, I do." My head almost exploded. I didn't ask any questions on cross-examination because I didn't want to muddy the waters. I won, and the child is doing great. Mine actually happened while I was sitting in the jury pool during voir dire. The case was a double homicide and the jury pool filled the entire courtroom. If you're not familiar with voir dire, it's when the lawyers ask the potential jurors questions to determine who they want to sit on the jury and who they want to exclude. It's a long and boring process for almost everyone involved, but 9 times out of 10 it's the most important stage in a case. So the lawyers are asking us questions, and if that question applied to you, you raise your hand and they hand you a microphone to answer the question. The question asked was, do you or anyone you know have prior knowledge of this case? So this older gentleman raised his hand, is handed the mic and proceeds to say, "Yeah, I work at the police station as a janitor and I heard 2 detectives talking about him," points to the defendant, "and they were saying he was about as guilty as sin." We all stared open-mouthed at the guy and I start chuckling because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Naturally, the defense attorney asked to approach the bench, followed quickly by the state prosecutor. After some quick and energetic whispering, the judge addressed the man. "Do you realize what you just did? You potentially poisoned the entire jury pool. I'll be calling your boss and you'll be hearing about this. You can count on that. You're dismissed, sir, but this isn't over." The man was escorted out and then the judge addressed the remaining jury pool, which was still in the mostly packed room. Now, I want you all to disregard what that man just said. I'm sure if any of you were ever accused of a crime like this, you'd want a fair trial and not to be condemned based on the words of one old man. I've been in court many times since, but never have I seen that level of downright jaw-dropping absurdity again. My boss had to defend a small-time delinquent as a duty solicitor. Before going to court, he asked her what he should do. She explained to him if he was cooperative and truthful, his sentence would be milder. After hearing the case, the judge asked him if he wanted to add something. He got up and explained to the judge, "My counsel told me to be truthful, so I wanted to tell you that not only did I do the robbery I'm being heard for, but also several others in the region." He continued to admit to several robberies that had been unsolved yet, and everyone, even the state attorney, were facepalming. Oh boy, when you follow your instructions on the class presentation to the absolute letter, look up and realize that your teacher, friends, and even your bullies are just facepalming and embarrassed for you. This has the same energy, but on a much grander scale with much more serious consequences. I almost feel bad for this hardened criminal. Literally the first thing I ever did, I was just a law student intern. The guy had a legit defense on a substance possession case, substances found in a jacket, guy wasn't wearing the jacket, they were going to have a very difficult time proving the jacket belonged to my guy. Had a long meeting with the client, explained everything. The client was excited. Day of the preliminary hearing, the guy shows up and sits down directly in front of the officer who arrested him while wearing the jacket in question. The exact same jacket we were going to say they couldn't prove belonged to him. Not in court, but at tribunal, and also I was plaintiff, suing for wrongful termination. My rep said, "So you terminated him because he was ill?" The employer said, "Yes, sir." "And he was ill because he's disabled?" "Yes, sir." "So you fired someone for being disabled?" "Yes, sir." I was in court for a directions hearing. The judge was already in a bad mood and asked why we were here for such a seemingly pointless litigation. Without giving details, he was right. The barrister starts to make our case, and I'm making notes about areas we need to further explore when I hear, "Excuse me, why were you so rude to me?" The client, who'd been told not to come, had come to court that day and was evidently incensed by the judge questioning the merit of their case. They berated the judge for about 3 minutes, with me and my co-counsel first stunned and then trying to shut them up before the judge adjourned the hearing. The case did not go very well, to my client's surprise and fury. Not me, but my former law partner. She was in court representing a client. I think in a hearing for a restraining order against her soon-to-be ex-husband, our client was telling the judge that when they met to exchange the children for visitation, the ex had kicked her. He immediately, angrily shouted, "She can't prove it. I didn't leave a mark." "Thanks, buddy." Probably the funniest one I ever came across happened to a colleague. We were prosecutors then. 18-year-old defendant applying for bail. He needed a residential address and got his dad to show up at court to confirm that the family home was available to him. The defense lawyer gets old dad to confirm that son can stay at the family home. Dad says yes. My fellow prosecutor gets up and asks dad, "Do you really want him home?" Dad goes off the deep end. "Jesus, the grief he's bought me and his mother, at all hours, doing smack, hiding stolen property in the garage, all-night parties. I'm on antidepressants and the wife's had a nervous breakdown." Dad goes off on one for 5 solid minutes. As the defendant gets taken back to the cells, he calls out, "Thanks, Dad, I owe you one." In pre-mediation meeting, once for an uninsured motorist, an insured had alleged that she couldn't walk without the aid of a cane and had a pronounced limp after an accident due to a lower back injury and a shooting pain in her right leg. The doctor's notes didn't support anything but a subjective injury after a few weeks, but she was still treating it 2 years later and going to new physicians. We had followed her covertly to see if she was really using the cane and had a limp. We got footage of her carrying like 4 grocery bags in each arm to her car in a Walmart parking lot, walking perfectly fine. When she got to her car, she even opened the trunk of her SUV without putting any bags down and lifted the gate with her knee part way. Her elderly mother was with her using a particularly decorative purple cane with a flower pattern on it. They followed her to a doctor appointment an hour later, and she's on video using her mother's cane and walking with a limp that would give Forrest Gump a run for his money. Never did follow up on how that played in the mediation, but I can only imagine it gave some attorney a facepalm moment for the ages. 2 moments in a DUI trial. The first was a passenger testifying for driver's sobriety when the DA asks her, "You keep saying he was sober, but are you even TIPS certified?" Which is a course for bartenders so they can recognize drunk patrons. She was certified. 2, the head of the county's blood lab accidentally admitted he'd cranked the sensitivity of his machines way up because he was, quote, experimenting. I didn't entirely get while I was putting the script together that these were in the same case. My goodness. It's good to know that the ruthless agents of the state that we can end up in front of make whoopsies like this when they have brain toots or don't get their cup of coffee before the trial. Makes me feel better about messing up major parts of my life like this on a daily basis. I was a defendant. As a teenager, I got busted with a couple of buddies throwing eggs at cars. We were actually only in the courtroom for our sentencing, and there was no trial. The judge called each of us up individually to ask us if we had anything to say. One of my friends tells the judge that he's a good kid who doesn't normally do things like this. That's a lie, we used to do it all the time, and that I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wish there was a video of my other friend and I sitting on the benches watching this happen. We simultaneously dropped our heads into our hands because we couldn't believe that idiot just said that. The judge was not pleased, and she took the opportunity to remind him that going to a store, buying eggs, going to another location across town, and then throwing those eggs at cars was not just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Late to the party here, but as a law student we were allowed to make court appearances under the supervision of an assistant district attorney. I was doing arraignments and my ADA said, "Don't talk to the judge unless he asks you specific questions." So the judge and the defense attorney were going back and forth about when the next court date would be. The judge wanted a specific date, let's say 4/20. The defense attorney was adamant that she couldn't do that date. In my file, I had a calendar with a big X over 4/20 saying, "Do not schedule." The judge and defense attorney go back and forth for several minutes. The judge wanted 4/20 and the defense attorney kept saying no. I was keeping my mouth shut because the judge hadn't asked me directly. Finally, the defense attorney relents and agrees to 4/20. The judge turns to me and says, "Do the people agree with the 20th of April?" At which point I say, "Sorry, Your Honor, but we cannot schedule for that day." The judge looked at me for a second and then just ripped into me. "Mr. Jones, you just heard me and the defense go back and forth for several minutes about a date you knew the people couldn't do. Do you like wasting the court's time?" It went on like that for a few minutes, him just berating me in front of about 200 people in court in Brooklyn. Finally, after me apologizing profusely and him giving me a withering glare, we moved on and went to the next case. At the next break, the judge approached and said, "Mr. Jones, please approach the bench." I thought I was really in for it. I walked up to the bench, the judge came down to talk to me and said with a big smile, "Don't worry about it, I was just giving you a hard time. Welcome to the Brooklyn Criminal Court." I was a character witness for my childhood dog in a civil trial between our neighbors and my parents. Opposing counsel was questioning me. I wasn't even out of elementary school at the time, and he asked if our dog was aggressive. She was a Rottweiler and very loving and incredibly protective of me and my siblings. His final question to me is one that I'll never forget. He asked, "Did your father tell you what to say before you came into court today?" I responded, "Yes." Then he asked, "What did he tell you to say?" I said, "The truth." Now, I was too young to remember the courtroom reaction, but according to my father, the judge audibly guffawed and the opposing counsel lost all the wind out of his sails. Ladies, what do you wish self-proclaimed nice guys would understand? Romantic comedies are nothing like real life, and using the tactics shown in them will only creep the object of your affections out, not win them over. They should be treated just like fantasy movies because that's pretty much what they are. Just a fantasy you enjoy seeing acted out for various reasons. It's like how it's commonly accepted that adult flicks aren't real. Well, consider romantic comedies emotional adult movies and treat them accordingly, please. Absolutely agreed. Do not show up under my window at 2 a.m. Do not creep until you figure out which hotel I'm staying at on my vacation and send miniature beanie babies that reminded you of me to the hotel addressed to me. Do not awkwardly try to steal my clothing to put on your pillow and sleep with because it smells like me. Do not leap between me and anyone I'm having a conversation with to ensure that they're not going to incapacitate me and commit the unspeakable act in the midst of a huge group of people. And do not find out where I work and consistently leave love letters under my windshield for me to find when I get off my shift. None of these things are acceptable or appreciated. I'm not quoting movie sequences, folks. I'm speaking from experience, and what these guys told me they considered romantic gestures. Although the showing up under the window and the love letter on the windshield ones are pretty 80s rom-com. I think proclaiming yourself a nice guy is the problem in the first place. People who are genuinely considerate and decent don't have to declare themselves honest and nice. People know them to be so by their behavior. Being nice, specifically as a means to impress women, as a means to an end, is not genuinely being nice. It's kind of like the Game of Thrones quote, "Any man who proclaims, 'I am the king,' is no true king." Hearing guys describe themselves as nice immediately makes you immature. It's the equivalent of saying, "I'm not like other girls." Sure, maybe you are or aren't, but proclaiming it does nothing for proving it. Let people judge you by your deeds, folks, and not just the fancy ones we put on to impress people. Doing a good or nice thing and then shouting, "Did anyone just see the really nice thing I just did?" is not a thing that will turn anyone on, guy, girl, or whatever. Big pick-me energy. Being nice is the bare minimum. You should be nice to everyone, not just the pretty girls, and you should do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you think it'll get you laid. You have to bring more to the table than just being nice. If women see you being nice to pretty women and standoffish to other women, especially if the other women are the pretty one's friends, they tend to see through that sort of thing. Things you don't think girls notice, but that we totally do notice. 1. You've been asking out or hitting on everyone you know as though at random. 2. Except for the girls who are near or below your attractiveness level. And 3. You have major depression or anxiety and are using dating to fix your personal problems. You don't get special credit for showing the bare minimum of human decency. I know this guy who likes to make a number about how he's a decent guy and a good guy and how women used to respect good men. He's not a particularly good man. He's a man who hasn't committed any crimes. He told me a story about how a girl passed out next to him and how she was so lucky to pass out next to such a good guy who didn't commit the unspeakable act. He then likes to tell this heroic story to people and expects praises about how incredibly well he did and what an exceptionally lucky lady she truly was indeed. He goes on about how he goes to school, knows how to shower, and doesn't drink or use substances numerous times a week. These aren't qualities that make someone a good person or a good man. These are qualities that make you a normal person. If the bar you're setting yourself is that you can function like a normally developed adult, should behave, like making your own money, taking care of your hygiene, following the normal social rules like not being rude to others and obeying the law, and that women should be more impressed or grateful for that, you need to either date someone who isn't able to accomplish those things themselves and finds them impressive, or then understand that the other person is doing the exact same thing. I really don't understand where this kind of attitude comes from. Maybe a product of parents who believe their child is a miracle and should be told so from every single thing they don't mess up. Actual nice guys don't have to tell a woman they are the nice guy. My husband is a kind man, a great man. He never once told me he was a good guy or a nice guy, he showed me. So, if you have to tell someone you're nice or good, chances are you probably aren't. My grandpa always had a saying, "Guys with big Johnsons don't gotta brag about it." I like to think it applies to this situation. That just because you're decent to me, it doesn't mean I owe you anything in return. As a guy, I would hate that so much. Some dude does something nice for you, then throws a tantrum when you don't go south of the border on him. Jesus, you didn't ask him to do whatever he did. If you're only acting nice to get her in bed with you, that doesn't actually make you a nice person. 1. Sometimes, while grateful for the nice thing you did, it's too much. For example, at a place I once worked, some guy asked my supervisor if he could have a little extra help on a project he was working on, and could I, the temp at the time, go and help him. When I got to him, he actually used it as a chance to hand me a rose. So, yeah, it was meant to be sweet, but it was completely unprofessional, especially as I was trying to get a permanent job. I also then had to reject him and he turned hostile towards me. 2, if you're only nice to me, especially as a way to get with me, then no, you're not nice. If I see you being nice to other people, then I'm much more likely to see you as a potential suitor. I lost my best friend over some nice guy BS like this. My significant other and I had gotten into a fight and he felt the need to console her and let her vent to him. About a week went by and he began asking if she'd like to meet and talk over drinks. At this point, the fighting was over and we were back to normal. She showed me a message saying I didn't deserve her and that he could treat her better. She deserved someone nicer. Ended up getting into a fist fight with him on my front lawn and we haven't spoken in 3 years. She's still with me and we're getting married next month. To add to the points people have already made, one of the reasons why a woman isn't comfortable coming out and saying, "I don't want to date you because I'm not attracted to you," and has to use other softer reasons like, "I'm busy, I'm just out with my girls," etc., is because of a genuine fear that things could go south during the conversation, and a guy who seemed nice at first could get violent or start stalking her. Not that that extreme scenario would happen with every guy she rejects, but it only needs to happen once for it to affect her life. One thing most women experience, frequently, this isn't rare at all, is an exchange like this, especially online. "Hey, beautiful." "Oh, hi. You want to go out sometime?" "Sorry, I have a boyfriend now." "You think you're better than me, you stupid B-word? You're not that hot anyway. I'm not going to do a 4 like you when I'm scoring 8s and 9s practically in my sleep. Have fun being a C-word." We've learned how to soften the blow, and we're afraid of being too direct because that violent outburst would be 3,000 times worse in person than online. These conversations usually start off reasonably nice, and you never know who the violent guy is going to be. They blend in with the other guys, Agent in the Matrix style, so we have to be cautious. If you're not a man who's going to give a woman a negative reaction when you're rejected, I understand being a bit offended or miffed when you just don't get a straight answer, but the thing is, we don't know that when we're saying no, and we're so afraid of the alternative angry, bitter, mean, or even the potential of the violent response. The situation can go so bad so fast, and we've seen or experienced it going so badly before. We're not trying to mess around or play games with you or keep you on the back burner. We're just afraid that if we do straight up say no, we're going to be called fat, ugly, stupid, a whore. We could well be degraded, barked at, or worse, actually attacked. We don't know that you aren't going to turn into a scary jerk in that moment. It can be very weird, scary moments for us. We aren't trying to be cruel or dismissive, but we don't know how else we're supposed to respond without risking our mental or physical health. Guys, please understand that we do in fact like nice people. The fact that you're a nice guy, or so you think, is not the reason someone isn't attracted to you. This is important to note. You get to see if a guy is really nice with how they deal with rejection of any sort. People aren't turning you away because you're nice, it's because you can't necessarily trust that superficial niceness. The 27 back-to-back messages at midnight are why they're turning you away. Desperation is the opposite of sexy, and it very often smells like excessive solicitousness. Reasonably attractive girls are as turned off by a stage 4 clinger as reasonably attractive guys are. You see generosity when you send her a gift that you can't really afford, and she sees pressure play and starts worrying about the strings attached. You see friendly interest when you ask her all about her life and take notes. She sees prying and starts worrying that she can't leave her phone unlocked around you. You see TLC when you want to spend lots of time with her doing all the things she likes. She sees a social vampire of a guy who doesn't have anything worthwhile of his own going on and starts worrying that you expect her to be rich and Amy. You see old-fashioned chivalry when you freak out about her opening her own door or offering to split the check or dealing with a creep without male support. She sees a guy who's so insecure he can't stand the thought of a woman autonomously dealing with a real adult life, and starts worrying about the embarrassing scene you're going to cause when an ex-boyfriend drunk dials her. If I'm not attracted to you, you will only ever be a friend. I should note that this applies to nice girls too. 1. If you're interested, tell her how you feel. No, giving hints doesn't frickin' count as not everyone picks up on those. And it doesn't matter how obvious you think it is, it's all up to her. 2. If you don't tell her how you feel, then she doesn't know how you feel. If there's a friend zone, it's your own damn fault. It's like refusing to go set up a set of stairs and being upset that you're not on the next floor. 3. Not every guy she's dating is a jerk. You only think that because you're jealous. 4. Or maybe he is a jerk to you because you've had a crap attitude toward him and acted all possessive of her. 5. And the reason she's always dating other guys is that at least they asked her out. 6. You just might not be her type. 7. Or she's just not attracted to you. There are people you don't find attractive in life. 8. Don't say you know you're her type. You know nothing. It's up to her. 9. Movies and books lied to you. Pining isn't romantic. 10. If you hold it against her that she's not that into you, you're not a good friend. 11. In fact, unless you want to be her friend for the sake of having her as a friend, you're not her friend. 12. If you offer to do things, you don't expect any repayment unless previously agreed on. 13. If you think she owes you bedroom favors, you are wrong. 14. Leonard Lake thought like this. 15. If you want the deed for your money or services, find a working girl or be a sugar daddy. And 16. As someone else pointed out, too many nice guys go into a scary fit when rejected. We all hear stories about this. See Leonard Lake. Don't do this. And finally, if you expect something in return for being nice, you're not a nice person. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The friend zone is made up. Girls lean on it a lot when they don't want to tell a guy that they're unattractive. If a girl says that she doesn't see you in that way, what she means is that she values your friendship, but that she doesn't want to do the deed with you. End of story. It's not like you got yourself into the situation by being nice or trying to be her friend. If you hadn't been nice, she still wouldn't want to do it. To reiterate, she's not attracted to you. If you want to be friends, be friends. If you're here to do the deed, don't pretend otherwise. Moping and crying about the friend zone isn't winning you any extra points either. Unreciprocated love sucks. We get it. Move on. Yeah, it also kills me when nice guys act like women should just date them anyway because women could never understand how much it hurts to be into someone who isn't into you. Like, the frick? Have a crush love that doesn't get returned is a pretty basic human experience. Men don't own that. Stop protecting us from doing the deed with other people. We're human too, and independent agents quite capable of deciding when we'd like to do the deed and get the deed done to us. If you see us slipping off with a bad boy, it's because we're down to do it, not because our pretty little heads have been manipulated or misled. And if you frame us as children in need of your white knighting, you've no business pursuing a romantic relationship with us anyway, you pervs. Newsflash, doing the deed is awesome. Get on board or get the frick out. Oh my god, yes. I hate it when they say crap like, most guys look at your body, but I'll only love your mind. Or, most guys just want to do the deed, but I'd give you a candlelight dinner and foot massage. Or, girls, stop showing your body. You have to be a lady to marry a gentleman. Most girls take pride in how their body looks and enjoy doing the deed. Even if you're looking for a serious relationship and not a casual hookup, you're still looking for someone who's compatible both emotionally and in the bedroom. Saying stuff like that just sends the message that you subscribe to outdated gender expectations and that a relationship with you would be unexciting and no fun in the bedroom. Women are not vending machines that you can drop kindness coins into until bedroom favors fall out. Womanity is not withholding getting laid from you and waiting for you to say and do the exact right combination of things to unlock the bedroom. Your desperation is repulsive. Women want to do the deed too, but they don't want to risk pregnancy, herpes, or your clingy drama for a crappy bedroom time. She has interests to protect too, and you're mostly antithetical to them. Stop being that. All these are good points, and the narrator wishes he could pass them back to his much younger self when he was just a D-bag nice guy freshman. Thank you for submitting. But what I'm really here to admire is the use of the term womanity. Surprised I haven't seen it before. Being nice is usually the minimum requirement for a partner. For anyone, man or woman, straight or not, who wants a good, fulfilling relationship. Don't think you're clearing a high bar just by not being a total butthole. What else have you got to bring to the table? Work on that. Don't delude yourself into thinking that women don't like to go out with nice guys. Almost every woman who's in a good, loving relationship would describe her partner as someone who is good, kind, and a decent person. So get that out of your head. Only messed up people you wouldn't want to be with anyway are going out with jerks or alphas or whatever else you want to call them. Crushes are often fleeting, so if you're befriending a woman or man, to feel them out for dating, make your move quickly. There's a good chance she has a little crush on you too in the beginning, but if you don't make a move and ask her out, she'll just assume you want to be friends and she'll move on to her next crush. 4. Don't get caught up with women who want to vent about their jerk boyfriends. More often than not, this just becomes toxic triangles where she has one guy for doing the deed and romance and one guy for companionship, and nobody is happy. Also, see my above tip on crazy people you wouldn't want to be with anyway. Doing the deed is not a right, it's a privilege, and most of all, it's a choice. You don't get to decide for me. You don't have a right to me. I don't owe you a chance any more than you owe some annoying girl you aren't attracted to a chance. You aren't nice, you're making me uncomfortable when you don't back off, and me calling you on your crappy behavior doesn't make me the one at fault. If you were really my friend, you wouldn't make our relationship about your own desire for bedroom favors and intimacy from me. I didn't friend zone you, you crush zoned me, and you're a really crappy friend if you never even want to be friends in the first place. If you pretend to be my friend, then turn on me when I don't want to F you, you're the one who was manipulating me, not the other way round. Not a female, quoting from an unknown source. Okay, you're nice. That's what everyone else should be. The bare minimum of being a decent person. What else? Are you interesting, funny, clever, charming, talented? Because the guy over there is also nice. He also goes to the gym, volunteers, has a band with his buddies, and is applying to law school. He also doesn't put me on a pedestal for having a hoo-ha. He challenges me to improve and be a better person. He doesn't give me everything I want, he supports me as I work towards my goals on my own. So what the hell else are you offering? Being nice doesn't get you any points. Your score is 0. Loser. If you're a nice guy and she doesn't want to go out with you, it doesn't mean she wants an awful jerk for a boyfriend, she just doesn't want you for a boyfriend. I can't count how many times nice guys have lamented they can't get a date because they're too nice, and girls only want guys that are jerks. They usually follow this up with comments about how they should start being jerks so they'd have better luck. I wish guys would just understand that I'm legitimately just being a kind person and that I'm actually a lesbian who's not interested in men. That if you're not attracting the kind of people you're attracted to, then maybe you are the one who has to change. We're human and we get randy and possess an innate desire to screw and get screwed as well. Stop protecting us from ourselves. We're independent agents and not children, and if you frame us as children in need of protection, you have no business pursuing a romantic entanglement with us. If you've ever been ditched in favor of a bad boy, it's because we want to do the deed without judgment and shame, which is a typical, healthy desire for men and women above the age of 12 or so. Nice is the absolute bare minimum you have to be. Self-depreciation isn't cute. If you say things like, "Oh, I'm such a loser," or "No girl is ever going to date me," even in a jokey way, it will not elicit any positive feelings from the person you said it to. It's like a woman saying, "Oh, I'm so fat." Similarly, if you view yourself as a lonely, forever virgin, or the guy who girls just love to friend-zone, then it's going to come across pretty obviously to women, and that isn't attractive. Literally nowhere is it written in the stars that anyone has to like you, let alone want to date you. Nobody is contractually obligated to think positive things about you. You have to be a likable person to get people to like you. Sometimes it takes more work for certain people, but if you don't do the work, people don't like you. I don't not like you because you're nice. I love nice guys. But nice guys are usually the ones who don't have to constantly proclaim how nice they are. Wait a minute. You mean I can't fake every aspect of my personality and then be upset when she won't sleep with me? Shocking. Nice guys tend to put women up on a pedestal. Don't do that. I don't want to be worshipped and have my butt kissed, and I don't want to have to try and live up to the idealized version you have of me in your mind. I just want to be treated like a regular human being. If you have to say that you meet the bare minimum, you probably don't, and even meeting the bare minimum doesn't entitle you to doing the deed. It reminds me a little bit of an ad I saw for a house when I was looking to rent. The features it listed included windows and a full kitchen, which are indeed things I expect a house to have. Went to look at the house and indeed meets some of the basic requirements for human habitation, was the absolute best you could say for it. You're not nice and nobody owes you bedroom favors. Women don't like jerks, they like non-socially inept, non-self-congratulating, self-assured, attractive guys. That's it. If you don't fall into at least one of those categories, that has everything to do with your personal shortcomings and nothing to do with the woman you fancy being a B-word. In short, get over yourselves. No one owes you anything, especially in a world where you can get all the bedroom stuff you want for a fee. If you need to do the deed, either get a working girl or get a better personality. If I'm talking to you and seem interested in what you have to say, I probably am. But that in no way means that I'm necessarily interested in dating you or doing the deed with you, because those aren't mutually exclusive items. Talking to you like a person in no way means I'm leading you on, because talking does not equal flirting. Along similar lines, if you act like you want to be a friend, then that's what I'm going to take you as. Don't get angry or cry friend zone when you're treated as my friend and my friend only, because how else was I supposed to interpret your behavior? Expecting anything else is either lying to yourself or to me, neither of which are particularly endearing. Be straightforward with what you want, or don't be surprised when you don't get your secret desired result. Finally, it's a really crappy feeling to find out that someone you thought was a friend was only there to try and get in your pants. You feel devalued and stupid because you've been lied to and betrayed by someone you trust. Don't be that guy, especially if it's to someone you supposedly care about.
Housekeepers working for motels, hotels, resorts, or cruise ships, what is the most what the fudge weird or awkward situation that you've stumbled into at work? I worked at this one hotel, and a guy bought in a mini propane grill and started grilling chicken in his room. We found out when the whole hall started to smell delicious. Unfortunately, we did have to make him stop. I was the night manager, and housekeeping told me there was blood on the walls. I went to the room and, oh my god, the girl was shooting something up, and obviously the blood had sprayed everywhere. She tried to extend her stay. Turns out she was just a really crafty working girl. She'd have the first John pay her room through Expedia, use it all night, and then use the money to stay again. She was permabanned after the blood, though. I worked with a woman who was the head of housekeeping for a large hotel in the area who told me this story. There was this woman and her daughter who were local but checked into the hotel for a few days. One of the housekeepers came in to service the room one morning while the mum was outside by the pool. The housekeeper walked in and found the girl in bed with blood everywhere. Turns out the girl came to town to have an operation to not have the baby, and mum needed to hide it from dad. The girl started hemorrhaging in her sleep while mum was already outside the room, and the housekeeper actually found her in time to save her life. The housekeeper was too distraught after all was said and done to clean the room. I can't remember if she quit or not. Another housekeeper was brought in to finish. My mum was a hotel general manager, and I basically grew up in hotels. The worst was a man who strung himself up in his hotel room on Christmas Eve. He had driven through the night to see his kids for Christmas, and his ex wouldn't let him see them. So he went back to his hotel room, set up a rope, and decided he didn't want to be alive anymore. My mum is still traumatized over finding that body. After that, she organized a party in the hotel lobby for every Christmas Eve and always invited all of the guests to try and get people out of their rooms and lift their spirits if they were spending Christmas in the hotel. Rough time of year for a lot of people. Your mum sounds like an absolute peach, though. Says a lot that instead of just battening down the hatches, she tries to use her experience to bring people out of what can be a very hard holiday for lonely people. I have a few, I guess. My favorite was when I wasn't working. I actually just got off my shift. When a large wedding party came back late at night, absolutely trashed, and eventually they all went into their rooms. A while later, the current desk person got a call to the 4th floor immediately. Turns out one woman's boyfriend locked her drunk butt out of the room, completely undressed. Not one to complain, she decided to sleep it off on the couches we put up in the elevator areas on each floor. Still undressed. My coworker went and put a blanket on her, and she woke up and said she was going to sue. She peed on the couch and then threw up on it, and eventually we got her back into her room. The next morning, she was so embarrassed she ran past the front desk to leave. We had an undressed drunk guy in the hall a couple of months ago. Couldn't find his room, so he was knocking on doors, waking up random guests, thinking their rooms were his. Completely shameless, though. Checked out in the morning at the front desk, acting like nothing had happened. He was a business traveler, too. The housekeeping staff at the hotel I used to work at would put all the adult toys they found in a box. It was a tradition to wrap the box and give it to our female boss at the Christmas party. People leave behind their bedroom equipment? That stuff's not cheap. Yeah, some people leave behind some very expensive toys, but when it comes to that, they usually come and get them. I once witnessed a woman blaming the reception staff for her husband catching a taxi to the airport without her. I have no idea if they'd been arguing. It's not the place of staff to pry. I used to work in a park with facilities for the campers that had to be cleaned every morning. One morning, the janitor, we'll call him Jose, came into work and started by cleaning the bathrooms. When he came to the men's bathroom, a ranger saw him go in, come back out, put on a hazmat suit and go back in. This actually wasn't as abnormal as you'd think, considering we get a lot of weirdos doing turd art on the walls. Anyway, Jose finishes up, heads over to the next set of campsites. Later that day, some campers find a body in the woods right behind the bathroom. Sure enough, some guy had been unalived in the bathroom. The police were not happy with Jose. Former hotel worker here, please check under your mattress if you stay in a hotel, because the odds are the housekeepers aren't bothering to lift up the mattress like they should. After you've lifted said mattress, go ahead and enjoy the copious amounts of adult magazines that are left there for you. Seriously, people leave adult magazines and DVDs under those mattresses all the time. Quite often, it's a regular guest who requests the same room and it's just their stash because they know the small Nepalese housekeeper won't lift the mattress even a little bit. Okay, update. Apparently some of you are taking the enjoy the copious amounts of free adult material as a literal statement. It was meant to be sarcastic, as at least for myself anyway, handling some stranger's random magazines for my own personal pleasure just seems unappealing. Oh, my top 3 were, in order, painted landscapes across 3 of the 4 walls, painted in number 2. Surprisingly talented. Used Johnnies placed over every light bulb in the room. I didn't actually discover until the rubber prophylactic started to burn. And finally, I had an employee give out the wrong keys to a room. The parents gave the keys to their small children, they ran ahead and opened the door, and inside was a couple performing what we shall simply say were very high-end costumed acrobatics, complete with ball gag and riding crop. I'm sure this is way worse at the low-end hotels, but I managed a Marriott and the standards are high, so some adult material under the mattress was one of a few really bad things we'd find. Every now and then a syringe would be found, but thank goodness that was housekeeping doing their job and not a guest finding it. When I was younger, I worked night reception in a really crappy rundown hotel. I took over the night shift from the afternoon shift and was given my handover. As per usual on the weekends, we had our late checkouts and wake-up calls for airport transfers. Come 2:45 a.m., I called the guests in room 3405, but I got no answer. Tried again a few more times and still nothing. Now, as I'd mentioned, this being such a crummy, -3-star, rat-infested hotel from hell, we had a total staff of 1. Me. So off I went, up 3 floors with the master key to fetch Mr. Collins. I knocked 3 times and got no answer, so I went in. What I saw next will haunt me forever. Across the room in the double-doored fake mahogany closet was Mr. Collins, completely undressed in a standing position, knees bent, shoulders slumped on the inside of the closet, with a belt attached around his neck, buckle side attached to the closet rail. Eyes closed and a great big smile on his face. Dead as a dodo. So, first aid training kicked in. I knew it was for nothing. The guy was as cold as a well-digger's butthole. Called the ambulance and started CPR, but it was obvious the guy wasn't coming back. Paramedics took over, but he was pronounced dead straight away. Working in the hospitality industry, you somewhat prepare yourself for grannies passing away in the middle of the night and the odd heart attack here and there, but never that sort of thing. In short, guy unalived himself while tickling his pickle with his belt around his neck. Couldn't be saved. One of my co-workers was vacationing in Mexico and decided buying green herb was a good idea, and leaving said herb in a backpack in his hotel room. When they returned to their room, the cops were rushing in and out of there. He began to panic because he was sure he'd got busted for substance possession and that he was headed for a Mexican jail. The cops asked if this was his room and rushed them in. They told the guys to pack up and that they were getting a new room. The room was dark, so my friend opened the blinds. Someone had jumped from their balcony and landed on theirs, thus exploding all over the glass door. That's a very complicated and weird sort of relief, I imagine, and one that would probably make you feel very guilty in the days to come afterwards. I bet the guy rushed that green herb out of there as quickly as possible. No way that it didn't smell. I work as a housekeeper at a casino during the party hours, and I've been there for a while. I have so many stories to share from how crazy it is there, it's pretty hard to believe the crap I've seen. One in particular, I got called to go close down a restroom because a young woman was having a medical emergency right there. I also had an older gentleman ask me if I had a boyfriend while I was cleaning the restroom and we were alone, and he grabbed me and kissed me. He was later escorted out with his wife. I'm a dude, by the way. I've also been attacked by a pantsless man, seen women go number 2 on the floor in front of me, and a nice intoxicated man deciding it would be funny to pee on people on the balcony below. I've been here for a while and I have so many stories from that crazy place. I don't plan on leaving anytime soon because it's just so interesting. Although as a housekeeping note for any of my customers, please stop standing so far away from the urinal. You will literally leave a puddle of number 1 and then I have 50 people all doing it every minute. You guys are killing me. Also, a good amount of people who crap on the ceiling. It amazes me the projectile range that these people have. Not a big thing, but something I'll always remember. I worked as a housekeeper in a 4-star hotel. It was quite an expensive place, and we often had rich guests from the Middle East. This will become relevant. The hotel, of course, had a spa area, and it was my duty to close this area at about 10 p.m., meaning to shoo the last guests out of the pool and sauna, clean everything, and close it down. One time I went to see if there were any guests still in the sauna, and when I opened the door there was a woman and man, I assume they were husband and wife, sitting inside. He was undressed, only with a towel around his waist, and she was fully veiled, wearing a head-to-toe chador inside a 90-degree sauna. Needless to say, I was surprised. I don't care about religious clothing rules, to each his own, I guess, but sitting inside a sauna fully veiled surely made me raise my eyebrows a bit. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Never worked at a hotel, but I delivered pizzas to them. This one time, this guy orders a pizza in the most run-down hotel in town. I go out there. He says, "Come on in." I usually will not go inside places, but for whatever reason, I took one step in. There's a girl sitting in a haze on the bed, like non-responsive staring, wearing only her undies. I got my money and left, not saying anything. I got halfway to the car and the guy leans out and says, "Hey," and gestures for me to come back. I'm a little nervous at this point as he's hanging out of his door. He could have a piece in his other hand for all I know, and he only approached halfway. He comes all the way out with more money, thankfully not a weapon of his own, and he says, "Hey, have a little extra tip. That working girl gave me a discount when she saw the size of my eggplant," with a big old smile on his face. I'm not sure if the discount was because it was big or small, to be honest. Now, I know full well that I shouldn't have touched this nasty, substanced-out working girl and sleazy dude's money, but of course I did. Oh, and another time I delivered to the Holiday Inn Express, the nice hotel in town, and my receipt said room 202. I knocked, they opened the door, paid for the pizza, and all, no problem. Got a decent tip out of it. I got back to the shop and my boss says, "Where the hell have you been? 212 just called and said you didn't deliver." Now, I'm confused because I just delivered to 202 as my receipt says. Turns out my manager wrote the room number down wrong. I took the pizza to the wrong guy and he just paid for it. So I called 212 and apologized and explained the mix-up. I make his pizza and run it out to him. When I get there, he tells me that management has been involved because he called 202 and said, "Hey, I think you got my pizza," and 202 said something to the effect of, "It's my pizza now, and if you want it, you'll have to come and take it from me." Very odd character, that 202. Anyway, I gave him the pizza for free because of the problem. He felt bad for me and gave me a $20 tip. So basically, the screw-up got me a funny story and a great tip. I worked as a night auditor for a small-town chain hotel in the early 1990s. One night, a nicely dressed businessman checked in on my shift. He came back to the desk a few minutes later and rented a few movies. We had VCRs in the rooms back then. One of the movies was The Hunt for Red October. It had just come out on video. The evening went pretty uneventful, but the next night when I came to work, I received the news. Sometime during my shift, he had deleted part of his own head with a deagle while in his bed. No one heard or saw this happen, and he was found by a maid at about 1 p.m. the next day, and he had bled out. None of the maids would clean up the mess. I went into the room and could see the huge pool of viscera on the bed and floor. It took them over a week to clean the room. It smelled terrible. As it turned out, the blood leaked under the floor and under the bed in the adjoining room that we'd still rented out, without knowing there was coagulated blood on the floor. We just kept airing the room out and spraying a lot of air freshener. To this day, I have never seen The Hunt for Red October. I worked for a small golf resort for several years, and this story still burns a hole in my brain every time I tell it. So we have these small hotel rooms that contain 2 beds and a bathroom. I serviced, like fresh towels and stuff, for 3 days and everything was normal. On checkout day, 6 men checked out.
I saw them meet up with their wives and girlfriends who weren't staying with them at the front desk as I was clocking in. I walked into the unit after they'd left and there was doo-doo and blood smeared everywhere. The walls, the sheets, the shower, and even the TV. There were about 20 rubbers laying out on the heater attached to the wall. As I was removing the sheets to throw them away, 2 butt toys with rubbers still on them flopped out onto the floor and one started vibrating. It had to be the most disturbing mess I had to clean up. And when I notified the front desk manager, he refused to bill them for leaving such a huge mess to clean up and said, "This is a place where people come to relax. If they want to let loose, then so be it." I was so mad. Which situation should I share? Alright, so a few girls and myself teamed up and cleaned these cottages for a state park. I usually clean bathrooms because the girls don't wanna, and I'd rather do it because screw it, you can just bleach everything and not have to worry about if crap in the kitchen is missing. Anyway, cleaning the bathroom when I heard my coworkers gag and tell me to come to the bedroom. I walk in and instantly smell something more foul than a chicken house. I look at the bed and there is a bloodstain almost 4 feet wide at crotch level, center of the bed. Oh boy, and no body anywhere to be seen. I have a feeling that this may be one of the more extreme examples of one of our patients who tripped and fell from the many medical videos we've done on this channel. I hope that the person was okay and that they actually went to get the medical help they clearly needed. I work at a 7-story hotel in Illinois, and one night a man tried to climb out of a 7th-story window to the roof, a real daredevil. He fell to his death, and the scene that followed was one of the most what the fudge moments of my life, and really changed my perception of people in general. It turned out that while climbing out of the window, his girlfriend tickled him, causing him to fall. Later, when outside, she screamed that over and over, "I didn't mean to make him fall, I was only tickling him." I thought that she had just died crying. In their panic, the remaining 4 people in the room took the elevator to the basement instead of the ground floor and proceeded to punch holes in the wall because they were so laced out on substances that they couldn't find their way out. One got out, but the rest were down there for over an hour. When the woman finally got outside where I headed after calling the cops, she literally clawed at me and begged me to do CPR in spite of the geyser of blood coming out of this man's mouth. He was obviously done. It was a confusing and chaotic night after that. I was the manager on duty, so I was the one who let the police into the room. I watched the police chaplain gather up all of the substances and paraphernalia into a shopping bag, and he did a thorough search as well. There was so much stuff, more substances than I've ever seen before or since. It took hours to clean everything up, and the last thing to happen was the fire department hosing the red stuff away. What was so what the frick that changed my view on people? The official police report stated that substances were suspected to play a role, but none were found in the room. It was just stated that the man fancied himself a daredevil, and others in the room didn't notice he was gone for several minutes. All total lies. I'll never believe another police report as long as I live. I'll never believe another news story, even a small one. What happened and what was reported was so different, I wondered if something had happened at another hotel on the same night. So not a funny story, but one of the most what the frick nights of my life. I was never even interviewed by the police other than giving them the information that I'd been given at check-in, and no, I was never interviewed by a reporter. I even called the paper a few days later and asked if they were interested in what really happened. They were sort of, meh, and never got back to me. What a disconnect from reality. This was just a small incident in a huge city, and now when I see major stories on major news sites, I can't help but think of the misinformation that must increase exponentially. I'm a supervisor at a hotel. 2 weeks ago, I got a call in the middle of the night from one of the bellmen telling me he needed help. I threw on some clothes and ran over, I live across the street, to find a drunk guy passed out in one of the lobby bathroom stalls amongst the single most foul odor I've ever smelled. I couldn't remember his room or who he was with. Turns out he'd decided to go number 2 in the hallway and then fell in it, smearing it all over himself and the floor. It ended with me having to call the cops and him calling me mean. That was actually the second time a drunk guy relieved himself of his solids in our hallway. Also, a housekeeper once found a working girl's menu of the services she performed, as well as a bag full of butt toys. There's an Indian casino near me that was originally a casino. They then built a hotel. As a soft opening, they invited tribe members and their families to stay for the weekend, just to work out any problems before they opened to the public. As it turns out, they had to re-renovate an entire floor of the hotel because they found that 15 out of the 23 rooms in one of the floors turned into a makeshift crystal lab over these 2 days. All the people that stayed in these rooms were family members of the people that worked at the casino, and it was swept under the rug and nothing ever came of it. I did maintenance for a hotel for a few months. The owner and his wife were both involved in the business. I walked into a room where the curtain rod was torn down. In there was the owner and our 18-year-old front desk worker. He gave me $2,000 in cash to not tell his wife. My brother worked in a bigger hotel in the center of Amsterdam. He was a minibar filler for the rooms, so they normally knock about 3 times before going in. He had one room, no answer, so he went inside to start filling up the minibar. As he goes in, he sees a small black case in the middle of the room. A second later, a skinny, undressed guy pops up from behind the wall, holding an adult toy and stuffing euros into my brother's hand. At this point, my brother sees the money and plays along for the moment. The guy opens the briefcase and pulls out a gigantic toy from it and starts inserting this massive thing into his now pulsing behind. My brother stands there in slight awe as the guy tells him to wait and stuffs more money into his hand. This is all happening very quickly. Next thing my brother knows, he's holding a lot of money now. The guy has placed himself on a small stool and is begging my brother to start whacking him on the butt with one of those table tennis bats from Heck, black leather with metal pins on it. My brother sees the money again, starts smacking the guy on the butt like 3 or 4 times before hitting him so hard he falls off the stool. My brother leaves with the money, and the guy is still begging for more. Brother tells management, and the guy is banned from the hotel. I've never laughed as hard as I did hearing the story. He made a lot of money, but still kind of felt like he had turned into a rent boy. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.